Гей, Марс! Із Америки приїхав наш надійний побратим, познайомтеся із ним. Гей, Марс! В росіян зі сраки дим. Гей, Марс! Гей, Марс! За ракетою ракету на паскудних ворогів випускає весь наш гнів. Гей, Марс! Робить все без зайвих слів. Гей, Марс! Гей, Марс! Московити зі снарядами гребуться на складах, коли робить свій бабах. Гей, Марс! Наганяє лютий страх. Гей, Марс! Гей, Марс! Розробляють окупанти свої плани у штабах, але чутне знов бабах. Гей, Марс! Лупить нечисть по зубах. Гей, Марс! Гей, Марс! Окупанти лиш заповнили склади своїм пальним, як вітається із ним. Гей, Марс! Підіймає чорний дим. Гей, Марс! Гей, Марс! Не любити московитів і довести нелюбов помагає знов і знов. Гей, Марс! Найточніший орколов. Гей, Марс! Гей, Марс! Гей, Марс! Гей, Марс!
На коліно своє полкове знамено, дивлюсь на нього я востаннє у нез'ясованій журбі, всю кров мою, всі скитання воно вібрало у собі. Питання
Прийшли окупанти до нас в Україну, форма новенька, воєнні машини та трохи поплавився їх інвентар. Байрактар. Байрактар. Російські танкісти сховались в кущі, щоб лаптем посьорбати довбані щі, та трохи у чах перегрівся навар. Байрактар. Байрактар. Приперли зі сходу до нас барани для восстановлення
великой страны.
Найкращий пастух баранячий хотар. Байрактар. Байрактар. Їх доводи всяке озброєння, різне, потужні ракети, машини залізні, у нас на всі доводи є коментар. Байрактар. Байрактар. Вони захопити хотіли нас зразу, а ми зачаїли на орків образу з російських бандитів, робить примар. Байрактар. Байрактар. Російська поліція справи заводить, там пивцю рашистів ніяк не знаходить, хто винен, що в нашому полі глухар. Байрактар. Байрактар. Веде пропаганду кремлівський урод, слова пропаганди ковтає народ, тепер нове слово знає цар.
Байрактар.
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 Hello everyone, I am the Enforcer, and I'm accompanied by Enforcer Matt.
And good evening, everybody, and welcome back to day 156 of the news, and it's good to see everybody once again.
And of course, we're going to be reporting the past 24 hours of the war of Ukraine here on day 156, and once again, as you all know, the Ukrainians have survived another 24 hours of war, getting us even closer to reaching the midway point of the 6th month of the war. It's honestly impressive to think that the Ukrainians have continued to survive so far, and the news today is unbelievable, as the Ukrainians were actually able to strike out at more Russian depots and bases than ever before in the entirety of this war, and according to what we've been able to collect, it is the highest amount of losses in terms of supplies that the Russians have ever lost in a single day. And so, we have a lot of news to report tonight. We're of course going to be reporting on all of the ammo depots that we were able to confirm on film that have been lost, and the Ukrainians claim that several more were lost as well, but we do not have any video or picture evidence to back some of those up. So we'll be waiting for that, but I'm sure that they were destroyed, just to give the benefit of the doubt. But without further ado, I do ask very much if all of y'all, if y'all would hit that like button. It helps us to reach more people, and the more people that we reach, the more this news is heard, and we can kind of get people away from mainstream news, which is just a cesspit. I actually had someone send a video of me, to me, of a certain news reporter from Fox News, and I gotta say, I want to save people from that unfortunate demise of listening to CNN or Fox, because every time I get a little glimpse of what's going on in those news networks, it shakes me to my core, and I'm very scared for people who watch that kind of news. It's just straight up fake and made a hearsay. But without further ado, let's go over tonight's schedule and let's see what we got. So we're going to be starting off in the Kherson area, of course, as usual tonight, and we're going to be covering the 4 bits of news, the 3 from the Kherson area and the 1 bit from Odessa. After we cover this news, we'll then be hopping over into Romania for a second, where we've actually seen the U.S. Air Force in action. Of course, as an American, it's always wonderful to hear that the United States Air Force is in action, and we will tonight be discussing what may be, speaking specifically about the Republic of China, what might be some bigger changes in the future to our coverage, now that we're going to be concluding our summary videos, our Ukraine War summary videos that come out somewhere around 6 p.m. Eastern Time. We're now starting to consider maybe we should replace that with international news, and most specifically, the focus of that would be what's happening in between China and Taiwan, and how the United States has now been directly involved into that. There's a phone call did occur today, and it does sound to be somewhat precarious and pretty tense right now between the People's Republic of China and the United States. We'll, of course, try and report on that in the future. Let us know if you would be interested in hearing that news. But we're now going to return back to our schedule. After we cover the news from Romania and the U.S. Air Force, which was what led us to that quick little aside, we'll then be moving up into Russia, and we'll be covering a little bit of news that happened in the Bryansk Oblast today, which I am chomping at the bits to cover. After we cover that, we'll then be moving down into our location unknowns in the Kharkiv area. But before we get to these 2 pieces of news, we're going to take a quick pause and answer 3 questions from the chat. After we answer those 3 questions, we'll then move on into the location unknowns in the Kharkiv news, and then also move down to include the Luhansk news as well. But before we move down to the Donetsk region and the rest of the news we have for tonight, which is from the Inohrdar Nikopol area, we'll of course take another pause to answer another 3 questions from the chat. After we answer those 3 questions, we'll then move on to our last bits of news for the night. We will try and make sure that we cover everything else, which that would be everything else, and then we'll return to Kyiv to cover the speech from President Zelenskyy, which will be rounding out our news segment for the night, and then segueing us straight into the question segment, where we'll answer everyone's super chats and also as many live chats as we can. I would also like to remind everyone, just because we haven't had this disclaimer in a bit, that the super chats are to support this channel. If you would like to ask a question and you do consider me qualified enough to answer it, please do throw in a question, because we always like to answer one in return for sending in a super chat, and we thank you all so much for helping us to keep this channel running, because without it, it wouldn't be possible. Just wanted to throw that out there. And also, the other disclaimer is that you do not have to send in a super chat to have a question answered. We do answer questions just straight out of the live chat at the end of the stream, and so I just want y'all to know this is not like there is no oracle of wisdom here. While a lot of people do hold me in high regard on my information and my analysis, I do not know everything. And so you do not have to pay to have a question answered. This isn't like a put 25 cents into the coin booth thing and you get an answer from the little crystal ball. But anyways, without further ado, let's get straight into the news. Starting off in the Kherson area today, right outside of the Kherson front, where we can see the Russians were raining down TOS missiles on what may have been a Ukrainian position, but I do have to ask the Russians, where in the world have the pixels gone? Because I do not see any pixels in this image, and based off of this, I'm going to have to say that we don't even know if Ukrainian forces were in this area whatsoever. But we can see the TOS missiles raining down over here and slamming into the outskirts of this village, causing the dark black round dots that you're seeing on screen, which is the clouds from the explosions of these TOS rockets. Of course, we don't know if any Ukrainian forces were lost in that barrage. We can't even tell much of anything from the infrared footage, rather than TOS rockets did land in an area around the village and explode somewhere in the Kherson area. With that, we're now going to be moving out of this part of the news, and also we'll be closing down that YouTube video. And we'll now be moving behind Kherson. Oh boy. Y'all know what's about to happen. If it's behind the lines, that means that the Ukrainians have done something good. And this is so far behind the lines that we can only credit this to one single weapon system, the HIMARS, which we of course have included the HIMARS song in our intro, our 10-minute countdown. Now to click on this video, we're about to watch an ammo dump that got hit in the small village of Brylivka, 80 kilometers behind the Russian lines, and we're going to listen to it snap, crackle, and pop like a nice piece of bacon. You see it out there in the distance exploding. I mean, you hear a little bit of the snap, crackling, and popping.
Херсонський район, Брильовка, взриваються.
Now we can see a little bit of a fireworks show going on. It looks like this may be one of those newfangled starburst kind of shells. I think the Russians are going to start leading the way in firework technology sooner than later. That's the end of the video, but it is another Russian ammo depot destroyed. Not only was this one destroyed, but a total of 12 of them were destroyed today, according to Ukrainian reports. And we have not been able to confirm all 12 of them, but we have been able to confirm a massive amount of Russian military bases and ammo depots have been hit, both inside Russia and inside of occupied areas of Ukraine. This is massive news, and just to cover why, let's explain for a second why logistics in these supply depots are far more important than knocking out tanks, armored personnel carriers, and soldiers on the front lines. Just in case if you all have not heard my speech on this, here we go. Soldiers, much like us as normal citizens, require food to eat. And so you have to find a way to feed them. And of course, food does not materialize out of the air, and so where do you get the food? You have to ship it in by truck. Not only that, but guns do not magically get more ammunition. That also has to be shipped to the front lines as well. And so where do you get all of that? From inside Russia. But the problem is that you can't just drive a single truck from a town like Voronezh all the way to the front lines and drop off that little bit of ammunition. It has to be streamlined a little bit so that way this process can be done faster and keep up with the rate that the military will need. And so what they do is that they load the ammunition onto a train in Russia. That train then travels into Ukraine and drops it off in a town like Kupiansk. And then a truck will take that ammunition from that train yard closer to the front line and drop it off in a large complex. And they will call it an ammo depot. Now, this isn't a purpose-built building. If we pull up Ukraine on Google Maps, which I'll show y'all real quick, I'll give y'all some ideas of what ammo depot-like buildings look like. Now, not all of the ones that I'm pointing out are ammo depots, but the specific one that we're going to point out here at the start in Brylivka is most likely, out of all the buildings we can see here in town, it appears that these would have been the most conducive to storage of the ammunition. And so they're going to be picking out these larger depot-like buildings. And if we travel anywhere around the front lines, for example, to Melitopol, and we zoom in here, you can see some larger industrial buildings over here, which would be suitable for ammunition storage. If we move up closer to the rail yard, we might be able to find some buildings. These are actually rail sheds, so those wouldn't be usable. And this is not usable. Those are flats. So out of all of these, I would have to say that this building is actually the most compatible in Melitopol for storing ammunition. Not only that, but it does have a railroad track that runs right nearby, and so it seems like it would be the most efficient for the offloading of ammo to then be sent to the front lines. These kinds of buildings will be used, and then that ammunition travels up to the front. If these buildings are knocked out, every single unit that was relying on supplies from further behind the lines that was attached to that ammo depot now has to find supplies from elsewhere. And so supplies have to be drawn from another depot, like one in Tokmak, for example. If we go down here, you can see a building here. I would say, yeah, it's got a railroad track near it, so it is compatible for the storing of ammunition. It has a railroad track really close nearby, and so this building could be used to store it. And so all of the forces that were in the Melitopol area, and let's say the front lines here, all the forces from Timashivka to Plodorodny to Molochansk have to be supplied from the ammo depot at Tokmak instead of Melitopol. And so now, not only are these forces drawing on the ammo, but the forces that were already drawing on that depot before, in the Pokrovsk, Nove, and Kharkov area, are also drawing on that depot as well, depleting that depot, sucking the supplies out of it until it will be run empty at a faster rate, or until that one's destroyed, and then all of these forces have to find another ammo depot to attach to and then get their supplies from. And so destroying these depots is literally a matter of depriving Russian military units of the ammunition, the food, and the supplies they need to even carry on a war. And if you go through historical examples, you can see where this comes into play massively. In World War II, the main reason that the Germans lost the Eastern Front, well, not the whole entire war, but specifically the Eastern Front in World War II, is that they did not prepare for an incredibly long engagement. They only prepared really for the war to last until the winter of that year. And while it's a common trope that they weren't prepared for the winter weather, which is true to some degrees, they were not prepared for a long enduring war, and they did not have the supply lines to supply a long-lasting multi-year war. They did not really set up railheads that reached the front incredibly quickly. They also didn't try and spend a lot of effort making sure that there was some kind of rationing in place within the heartland of Germany to make sure that food could be stretched to both the military and the civilians. The Germans made no accommodations for logistics whatsoever during the entire course of the war. In fact, by the time 1944 and 1945 came around, there wasn't even enough paint for German tanks to be painted in anything more than a simple factory primer, and steak was considered an incredibly rare luxury by late 1944 because rationing had been done so poorly. In fact, it didn't exist during the entirety of World War II for Nazi Germany. And so you can kind of see right there from that historical instance that it is important to make sure that your supplies are kept up incredibly well. Also, as another example, although this one is kind of getting a little bit too far back, during the Napoleonic Wars in 1813, when Napoleon was marching his way to Moscow, you may remember that the winter set in then, and the supply lines for for Napoleon, and of course any military through history, don't really survive well through the winter. But Napoleon believed that if they just marched on a little bit further to Moscow, the war would end. What he didn't expect was the Russians at that time would use a scorched earth policy to burn every single bit of stores, supplies, or I guess you even say shelter in a way, because they almost burned down the entire city of Moscow once the Napoleon's army arrived, that they had to retreat out of Russia with almost no supplies of any sort. And so that's really what led to Napoleon's defeat as well, was not considering the logistics as an important thing. So now, in Ukraine, in the modern day, when you see the Russians making that same kind of folly, and not only is logistics almost the least thing of their concerns, the small amount they have of it is being destroyed at lightning fast rates by the Ukrainians, especially since the introduction of the HIMARS. We're starting to see scores of ammo depots get destroyed, and each week, the number destroyed per day continues to climb higher and higher. And so you can start to see why this is going to become a massive problem for the Russians. And if you wanted to listen to all of the logistical issues that I talked about earlier on in the war, you can go all the way back to those streams at the very start, because I was deeply entrenched into logistics then, because it was literally deciding the war. But at this point, with the war kind of slowing down in most fronts, logistics is still, of course, the war-winning factor here, but it's not as important as it was when the entire front from north to south to east was moving at the same time. But with that, I hope that does explain the Russian supply line issue that they're going to be facing. And not only did the supply depot here in the village of Brylivka explode today, there was also another explosion and fire in Novokakhovka. We're not really sure what caused it, but you can see that there were multiple fires all throughout the city today. And so we're not sure, and when I say we're not sure what caused it, most likely HIMARS missiles hit these locations, but we're not sure what's causing the fires to continue to burn. They look like they may just be Russian vehicles or Russian positions. It doesn't necessarily look like an ammo depot because the explosion is not large and it doesn't appear to be constant. But then again, this could be an early picture of the ammo depot catching on fire, and so we're not entirely sure yet, but we are assuming that this may be another ammunition depot that was wiped out in the Kherson area. And so great job to the Ukrainian forces in the Kherson area for knocking out 2 ammo depots that we can confirm here on film. And not only that, but once we circle all the way back around to the Southern Front news, there's also a lot of great news coming from the Innerhardar area as well. But with that, to discuss the Kherson front line a little bit, we haven't gotten any news today from an actual video evidence of the Ukrainians or the Russians conducting any activities here. We do know, according to the Ukrainians, there is some kind of a counterattack going on here. We don't know the intensity. We don't really know a lot about it because there's been very little video evidence of anything going on here from either side, but we have heard of some progress that the Ukrainians did retake the village of Vyskopilya in the north, but we haven't heard anything beyond that. So we're hoping the best for the Ukrainian counterattack, but right now, there is absolutely no information to go off of. All I can tell you is that there is one that's ongoing. Moving on over into the port city of Odessa, we have heard incredible news today as we finally got confirmation that the food shortage that everyone has been worrying about will be averted, as the president of Ukraine, Volodymyr Zelenskyy, along with the representatives of most countries in the G7, arrived in the port city of Odessa today to show that Odessa was ready to ship grain around the world. And apparently, it is going to be called the Grain Corridor. There's always got to be a name for everything these days. But still, I'm not complaining. It's good to see that grain will eventually be shipped out of Odessa incredibly soon. And hopefully this will be able to avert that food crisis that we're looking at that could have affected up to 450 million people worldwide. A pretty substantial figure, something like 6% of the world's population. And so, once again, great to see. Can't wait to see this actually occur. And if we look at this picture, unfortunately, I can't really point out all of the representatives of each country here in this picture. I hate to say that, but one thing that we can notice in the background is that the ship moored here at the port that's behind them in the picture is the Polar Net from Turkey. And so a Turkish ship appears to be in the port and may be ready to unload grains. And as we can see right here, this appears to be one of the aggregate storage, I guess you could say, conveyors that would most likely load the grains onto the ship from the port. I'm not entirely sure, don't know a lot about port cranes and equipment, but that does look like what I've seen before on some maritime videos where they're showing aggregate storage being shipped. But it's great to know that the Ukrainians will finally be able to ship this stuff out. But once again, there was always a little bit of a catch with this stuff. We already know that after the Russians made the agreement that they would allow for a grain corridor to be made and for Ukrainian grains to be shipped out of the country from Ukrainian ports, the Russians then immediately, just hours later, attacked Odessa with missile strikes directly targeted at the port's infrastructure. So once again, while this is a great thing, the Russians could actually attack these ships at port and end up destroying and sinking some of them at their moorings, ensuring for an incredibly long time, maybe throughout the duration of the war, that no grain could be shipped out. Hopefully that doesn't happen, but I don't hold high regards for the Russians, their policies, or their trustworthiness. We've seen too many times through this war that they're an incredibly untrustworthy country and government. They break treaties as soon as they make them, so hopefully this will go well, but once again, I'm going to be waiting with bated breath. With that, we're now going to be moving out of the Odessa area, and we're now going to be moving into Romania. We kind of got into the international news a little early, but we did see an AWACS plane, just butchered my way through that, but we can see an AWACS plane from the United States Air Force flying over Romania and keeping an eye on the events going on inside of Ukraine. Of course, Radio Free Europe was the one who provided this video, and I have to say they do incredibly good reporting, always based on video evidence. And one thing I would like to say to all of y'all, because I do know a large amount of y'all do frequent other news networks, channels, and so on, all around the internet, I would like to make one point. And it's kind of a word of caution for me. Never take anything at face value. Because a lot of what the mainstream news does, and some YouTube channels do, is that they never actually show evidence for what they're speaking of. They will, and this is kind of pertaining to this video and why Radio Free Europe is an incredibly good source. I saw, just as a specific instance, Tucker Carlson from Fox News. We're not getting into the politics on that, although he is clearly pro-Russian. He was talking today about what President Zelenskyy said about inflation, saying that President Zelenskyy said, "I do not care about inflation. The Americans will pay what they have to." And the problem is that for President Zelenskyy to have said that, and every single thing he has said during the course of this war has been recorded on video, for them to not present a video showing him clearly saying that threw in a lot of questions in my mind as to whether that really happened or not. A lot of news these days revolves around hearsay and trust me bro and he said and she said, and always make sure that when you're watching news there is some kind of video or picture evidence to back it up, or direct video quotes from the person who said it, because otherwise these people could be straight up lying. And it's very important to remember that, because everyone who's saying something on the internet is not always saying it with the best in mind and trying to be as truthful as possible. But without further ado, now with that disclaimer out of the way, I do have to say that Radio Free Europe is an incredible news source. I highly suggest if y'all were looking for a second source of news on the war, y'all go check them out. They provide loads of video evidence of whatever they're talking about, and I consider that to be the pinnacle of trustworthy reporting. And so with that, here's the video they've made on a US Air Force AWACS flying in Romania. Nice little view of the ground there. We can now see the internals of the AWACS.
We are on the east side of Romania, looking to the Black Sea. So the
Hang on.
purpose is to...
Correction here. It's not the U.S. Air Force. This rank is not a U.S. Air Force rank. I can't tell you specifically whose country this would be. I hate to say that, but we're going to let this video continue. Hopefully we'll find out here in a second.
Stay as long as possible into the on the east side of NATO to give surveillance to and intelligence to the HQ. I believe that both sides are aware of what we are doing here, protecting NATO airspace, saying that they should not actually go more to the west, and that's what we are here. They know that we are ready.
Okay, so we got a little bit of something to unload here. It appears that this is not a U.S. Air Force crew, a Luxembourg crew, or any crew for that matter. It's literally a NATO AWACS. We have a German operator here, an American operator, and a Spanish operator, all in the same plane. And not only that, but a pilot from Luxembourg. This is the most international crew I have ever seen working in an AWACS. Usually, each country flies their own AWACS. The United States actually has a decent amount of them. But here we can literally see a NATO AWACS, which is incredibly interesting. And I did not know that NATO took joint responsibility amongst multiple nations of flying and operating these planes. So with that, we're going to let the video continue.
We take off with as much fuel as we can, but it's not always enough to fulfill the entire mission. So that's why we have a tanker aircraft coming to meet us.
Now I see them conducting some in-air refueling.
To have our sensors.
A pretty difficult task.
They give us fuel airborne, so we save a lot of time and basically can stay longer in the area where we want to keep our sensor.
Почти 4 часа мы провели в небе над Румынией и почти столько же над Польшей. Это уже привычная длительность разведывательных полетов НАТО, ну и маршрут, собственно, тоже привычный. И выбран он не случайно, потому что именно таким образом можно увидеть как можно большую часть территории Украины и также европейскую часть территории России.
We can monitor where aircraft take off from, where they're going, where they're flying, and what they're doing. Our mission has focused on showing a credible deterrence and showing the resolve of the alliance. So what we do is we are flying right now on the edge of NATO space to show that we are prepared to defend NATO's borders and that we are fully aware of what's happening everywhere around NATO's airspace. We did see at the outset of the war was a large number of aircraft around Kyiv, around other places in western Ukraine. And we saw that shift drastically over the last several months. So now most of the Russian aircraft that we see are focused in the south and eastern portion of Ukraine. We would like to see civilian air routes reopened around Ukraine, so civilian airliners passing over, and no more Russian aircraft intruding into Ukrainian airspace.
Now see a view over the sky. I always love the view of from aircraft when they're flying, of course, over the cloud cover, because it's just so beautiful, you know, to look at. I've only flown on a plane, I think, about 3 times in my life, and every single time it's been incredibly fun. I enjoyed it a lot. One time was on Delta, the other times are on Virgin Atlantic, but I enjoyed them both pretty well. But anyways, moving on from that. Also, I'd like to notice the just derogatory slur that this guy has written on his notepad, on his I guess you could call it a joystick if you would like, but it's definitely not a joystick. Matthew, can you read that off for me right there, where my mouse is?
I really can't see it. It's so blurry.
It says hobo.
Hobo.
I bet
What's
it's
it say above it, though?
It says NATO 01, and then it says right beside hobo 23, and then 0945 below that. It's probably the call sign of the plane or something else. Of course, funny to see. It definitely has a utilitarian purpose, but still, I thought that was pretty funny. And with that, that's the end of the video, and that is one of the literal NATO AWACS planes that is guarding the skies over Eastern Europe. Of course, it is sending a bit of a message that the Russians will not go further, and if they do, all of NATO will respond in kind. And I think that's a wonderful message to send, and something that we should make sure to send incredibly loudly. In fact, y'all may not know that this is a normal occurrence, but usually the United States and the Russians both test each other's airspace by flying strategic bombers like Tu-95s or B-52s near each other's airspace. And if the United States really wanted to send a message, we could just send a couple of B-52s close to Russian airspace over the Bering Sea and kind of get the message across that way. Or we could send them over the Arctic. You know, it should be a little bit more intimidating. If y'all know what I'm talking about, you know. If you don't, you don't. But still, it's an incredibly interesting thing to see NATO AWACS planes airborne, and also to see them in action and what the crew looks like, which is a very multinational makeup. I bet you it's incredibly interesting for anything to pop up on radar in there, because the German's going "Ungunsi and then the French is going and the American is like, what? And they don't know what they're doing. Of course, I'm joking. They all speak English. But it's great to see that the entirety of NATO actually flies aircraft jointly and are protecting the airspace. With that, we're now going to be moving on into the next bit of news, which is inside of Russia, and is something that is far more plain to the eye than normal. We actually saw a Russian base in the Bryansk Oblast in the town of Klimovo being hit by Ukrainian artillery barrage. We don't know the amount of damage that was caused, but the barrage was large. And so with that, here's the video. And they're looking out the window. The artillery barrage still appears to be coming in. And I gotta say, it looks like the Ukrainians are just not playing games anymore. They are literally going after everything within reach. We now see a still picture of the clouds of the artillery explosions in the distance. And I've got to say, I'm pretty happy to see this happen. Now, if we know exactly where this is, let's pull up Klimovo on Google Maps, and let's go look at that specific base and where it could have been. All right. So, we have what appears to be... this one is surely abandoned. Yeah, it's got trees growing in the tarmac, so that's definitely not it. Let's see, we want to be somewhere in this area. Sorry if it's herky-jerky and really fast-moving, but I'm trying to see if we can find it quickly. It's not any of these. It's not this. Oh, goodness. I bet you the monthly rent here is incredibly low. There's school number 2. Very nice name for a school. Of course, here in America, you get things like, let me think, Lincoln High School and stuff like that. In Russia, you go to school number 2. Let's see here. We got a shanty. Well, no, those are the garages. I was about to say shanty shacks, but let's see. Man, I'm trying to find this little base. Maybe. No, that's not it. Let's see. I want to find this thing. Let's see. We're going up more to the northern side of the town. We have something here, but that looks like whatever it is. Ah, man. I think maybe the Russians have when was the satellite image taken? It was taken in 2022. So I'm not sure. Wait a minute. Okay, so it looks like there were some supplies being held here. Let's zoom in here. Looks like there were a decent amount of vehicles here. But I can't really tell you what kind of condition they're in. And based off the satellite images, they could be in any condition. They could even be derelict. But I'm not entirely sure the Russians are sending this kind of quality of equipment over there at this point in time. And so the Ukrainians may have been striking this to try and damage as much of it as possible. Because while the tarmac out here isn't used, which clearly makes it look like it was a air base at some time, and it now appears to have been converted into an army base where they're storing vehicles to maybe be sent into Ukraine. So great to see that the Ukrainians hit that, if that is the exact base that we're looking for. And I can't wait to see how much damage was actually caused there. Now, we might not ever know. The Russians usually put that kind of stuff on lockdown, and it is far enough out of town that the videos that would come out would have to be from a Russian soldier. But we will still be waiting for a video on this, because if we do get one, I'll be pretty happy to see it. Also, another thing that I noticed in this town is the Museum of Friendship of Peoples. Oh man, that's ironic, isn't it, considering that they're not really friendly with any people. It doesn't really look like there's a lot of friendliness about this building. It looks pretty cold and uninviting, and there's also this giant nest for what I would consider most likely a Russian soldier still to be born up in this telephone pole. And with that, we're now moving on to the next bits of news further south and in the location unknowns. But before we get there, we're going to take a quick pause to answer 3 questions from the chat, and after we answer those 3 questions, we'll then move on into the location unknowns and the Kharkiv area, and then move on down towards the northern Luhansk area as well. And so before we get there, let's get to the questions. So what do we got, Matthew?
All right, and we are now entering our first question segment of the night. And up first, we have a $100 super chat from Linda Joyner, which is in memory of the Azov soldiers. They are true heroes. I'm heartbroken for their families and friends.
And I thank you so much for the support, Linda. And also, I do have to say that we have heard some unfortunate news. I have not been able to confirm it today, so we have not reported on it. But we did get the indication that apparently a Ukrainian, a Russian prisoner of war camp for the Ukrainians was bombed somewhere within the Donetsk Republic by the Russians. I'm not entirely sure about that story. We're still waiting for some video and picture confirmation of that to, of course, tell the story. But just in case if that did occur, I do also feel incredibly sorry for them. I think that may have been Russia's way to get around the problem of sentencing all of them to death and giving the Ukrainians a possibility of trying to get them back, was to try and bomb the prisoner of war camp and kill off as many as possible, and the remainder maybe try and finish off other ways. It's an incredibly unfortunate thing to think about, and I think, although it may appear as an accident, it is definitely a blatant attack on those prisoners to try and kill them off, because the Russians have made it clear since the start they want them dead. And so with that, I thank you so much once again for the support. It helps this channel to keep on running and keep on reporting on this war, and hopefully we will have some confirmed evidence soon on that specific attack, either in picture or in video. And so with that, thank you once again for the support. I hope that does answer your comment. And with that, we are on to the next one.
And up next, we have a $50 super chat from Anthony, who says, I saw a Russian on Reddit today. He said that the Russian military should fully level Kyiv to the ground in order to kill Zelenskyy and his commanders. That shows how little Russians care about innocent Ukrainians' lives and how crazy that some of them are.
I would have to agree. A lot of them are crazy, and as we've seen over the war, like the Russian mutilating the Ukrainian prisoner of war in Severodonetsk, there's not a lot of redeemable Russians out there, at least that are serving in the government or in the military. There are, and I do have to give credit, because while we see an incredibly large amount of sick Russians in this war, specifically in the military and the government, there are some Russians out there who do not support this war. Some of them have fled to Georgia and Finland. Some of them have fled as far as Canada and the United States. And then, of course, there's the remainder of them who say such things like that are still inside of Russia. But I do have to say that they are. It sounds incredibly harsh to say, but now I can kind of understand why in World War II the Nazis were such a deplorable group, because one thing that we've done over time is that we've made it sound like not a lot of Nazis were, well, not a lot of Germans were particularly bad in the Second World War. And we've always tried to make it sound like it was just a small little group of Germans that were going around and committing these atrocities of killing tens of millions of people. And, you know, another interesting thing is that we always talk about the concentration camps of the Germans and how they killed around 11 million people. But there's a whole group of millions of other people that never went to the concentration camps or were literally killed where they sleep. And a lot of those were in Ukraine and Belarus and the Baltic states. And a lot of them, as well, were all the way up to the gates of Moscow, pretty much. And we never talk about those, and those are additional millions of people that were killed by the Germans and their in the Second World War, and pretty much their war with what they considered the inferior Slavic people that they were trying to literally exterminate. And I feel that now that we've seen this war and how this has unfolded, that we've been giving a little bit too much credit to the average German soldier in the Second World War. Because we've seen literal normal Russian soldiers, just normal, I guess you could call contract soldiers, committing heinous atrocities. We have never seen a large amount of all of these war crimes being perpetrated by the Spetsnaz or the VDV or the Wagner group. These are committed, well, the Wagner group. These are literally committed by the normal rank and file of the Russian military, and that's made me seriously reconsider the kind of historical narrative that's been made around the German army in the Second World War, because now I'm fairly certain with how this war has been playing out and how human nature is almost always a universal constant, that millions of the people that were the civilians that were killed in the Second World War in the Eastern Front were most likely just killed by common soldiers in the German army. But getting back to answering that, I would have to say that the Russians are pretty insane, and they've almost gotten into a racist hatred against the Ukrainians, and they treat them like subhuman people, much like the Nazi Germans did in the Second World War to the Slavs in general. And so with that, I hope that does address the comment, and I thank you once again for the support. And with that, we are going to move on to the final question of the segment, and after we answer that, we'll then go into the location unknown news, the Kharkiv news, and the northern Donbass news. And so with that, what is our final question of the segment?
And before I get to the final one of the segment, I want to give a shout out to John Dameron for putting in a $50 super chat without a comment. But John, thank you very much for that very generous support, and we appreciate you very, very much supporting our work here on the channel. And to our last super chat of the segment, we have a $30 super chat from WF2U, who says, Enforcer Matt and Enforcer, the Morse messages tonight are message number 1, very detailed coordinates he puts there. And message number 2, riddle me this. What do the Russians have plenty of but keeps disappearing?
Well, ding, 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 you got it correct. You got both of them. And actually, interestingly enough, I'm not going to say what those coordinates lead to. I'll just let y'all put that in on Google Maps and find out what that's pointing out to, because I think the dots will add together themselves. I don't want to say that officially on YouTube, what we're doing with that, but I hope that that's helping out someone somewhere. Moving on to the other one, you did get that message correct, and so I want to ask the entire chat this. And Matthew, could you read that message off real quick for everyone to answer?
So the riddle was this. Why or what do the Russians have plenty of but keeps disappearing?
All right, and so I want to see how many answers we get to this. We're getting a lot of good answers. All of them are pretty much correct, but the specific answer I was looking for was ammo. And so I would have to give the prize to Tim P, who was the first person to put ammo into the chat. So congratulations to you. You got the riddle correct, and I hope you all have enjoyed that. And thank you so much to all of our Morse code readers here in the live chat who have been here consistently, always listening to the Morse codes and also deciphering them. And so with that...
And also, Enforcer, real quick, I also want to give a shout out to Ashley. who was actually the first, way back at the early part of the stream, who put in ammo as well. So I just want to give Ashley her credit there so she doesn't get upset and think that I didn't see it.
Oh, really? When?
Oh, real early, like maybe 15, 20 minutes ago.
Oh, well, then congratulations, Ashley. Sorry, I was just looking through the live chat that just happened right then because I thought that was the first time anyone had seen the Morse code message. But if you were the first one to get it, Ashley, then congratulations to you. Sorry, Tim P. I have to do what they do sometimes at the Oscars, which is snatch the Oscar from you and hand it to someone else. Yeah, so now I have to give it to Ashley. Sorry, Tim P. But thank you so much, Ashley, for getting it correct. It is, in fact, ammo that they're losing. But I do have to be honest with y'all. All answers are correct. A lot of y'all are saying tanks, soldiers, blow-up dolls. Y'all are all right. They're losing all of them in massive numbers, and it's good to hear as well. And hopefully the Ukrainians can pump those numbers up. I say that every time I say that claim, but I seriously do hope that those numbers do rise as the war continues on. Maybe there will be a day when the Ukrainians can actually take out 500 Russian soldiers, because the faster they can get to those kinds of numbers, the less the Russians can keep this war going for longer. And so with that, thank you so much to all of you, and once again for deciphering the Morse code message, and thank you once again for the support. And so with that, we are now moving on into the next segment of news. If you have sent in a super chat tonight, do not fret. We will answer all of them by the end of the night. And also to all of our live chatters, if you've thrown in a question or would like to, we do answer a decent amount of those by the end of the stream. So make sure to throw it in if you're interested. But of course, if you would like to support this channel and help us to keep on running, it is, of course, the only way we keep running is through super chats. We don't run any ads. This is an ad-free thing because I want the news to actually be enjoyable to watch instead of watching like 50 ads nonstop. I feel like that's incredibly annoying and doesn't really benefit anyone. So we entirely rely on our viewers like PBS for support. And so with that, we're now going to be moving into the location unknowns. And starting off our location unknowns on a high note, we can see a kamikaze drone dropping grenades. More specifically, this kamikaze drone was the grenade. We see it flying with a high-pitched whine, and we can now see the target, which is this house right here with a blue door. You can see some Russians wandering around in front of it, and this footage was also taken by a drone. We can now see this man living in the future, right here, using some VR goggles to try and guide the drone into the house. He's actually the pilot.
Четверта хата, сині двері. Бачиш сині двері? Да.
And that was the drone pilot confirming that they got in a dead-on hit. And so here's him pulling off the incredible, and I don't think anyone's going to believe this, but it's insane. He actually flies this drone straight through the open door in the house right to all the Russians inside. So he swoops it down in here, flies through the door, and we didn't see that part, but you could see it aimed straight for the door, and then you can see the explosion billow out from inside the building. What a shot. That is a hole-in-one right there. Now we hear all the Ukrainians celebrating, of course, because it is a good day.
Я в них тупо залетів. В двері, пацани. Дивіться, наблюдайте.
Дивлюсь. А, їх вже нема синіх, блядь.
А вони вилетіли?
Воно вибігає.
They're all having a good little laugh and a bit of fun. And I would like to say this. I think that the Russians have pioneered a brand new kind of game show. Y'all have heard of Wheel of Fortune. Y'all have heard of all kinds of shows like that. But I think we've got a new one called Lotta of Choice. And so the goal of this game is that a Russian soldier will be sitting somewhere in the front lines. And if he's sitting in the lucky spot, then his family will be awarded a white Lada. Of course, the family is always happy to get a white Lada, and I think that it's actually a pretty interesting game to play, and I highly suggest that more Russians try and get in the bidding. The more obvious you make yourself, the better chances you have of winning the game. And so with that, it's great to see that the Ukrainians are, of course, dispensing, I guess you could say, the ability for the families to gain their prizes from the show, and I do believe that the show is getting some rather good ratings at that. With that, we're now going to be moving on to the next bit of news, where we can then see a lucky shot. And I mean a lucky shot. We can see a Ukrainian drone dropping a bomblet onto a BMP, and by the good fortunes of the wind and every other variable at play here, this bomblet is going to fall straight into the driver's hatch of this BMP, right there. Oh my gosh. You know, we don't see a lot of shots like that with the bomblets. A lot of y'all may remember when it went through the sunroof, but we've rarely ever seen anything where the bomblet goes straight through the hatch like this. It's like a 1 in 1,000 kind of opportunity, and that was a brilliant shot. It appears that the BMP-1 had already been abandoned before the bomblet was dropped, so it appears that the Ukrainians are trying to clean it up and just ensure it's destroyed, but golly. What a nice shot. I bet y'all can all agree with that as well. With that, we're now going to be moving on to the next bit of Location Unknown news, where we can see some smart rounds being used on the Russians, specifically 155mm smart cluster munitions. We can hear some pretty nice music, and we can see this convoy moving through the field. Now, what's interesting is that I think we actually see the smart munition here. It's this white dot that's flying through the air. Apparently, yes, that is what it was. It projected the shot downwards from the shell and straight onto this vehicle, taking it out immediately. What a munition. Now that's honestly impressive. Looks like it took out an MTLB, perhaps. I can't really tell you for certain. And we can see one of the crew members taking a hike, or a run, or a jog, or a 10K, or a marathon. We can actually see a second one doing that as well. Pretty interesting to see, and of course, these 155mm projectiles only come from the West. There are no, I guess you could say, Ukrainian-made 150mm artillery pieces that could use these kinds of smart ammunition, and so this was most likely a Caesar SPG, a Panzerhaubitz, an M777, a Crab, or any of the Western artillery systems. They all fire the 155mm shell, except for the L119, that fired the shot that flew right over this vehicle and then exploded above it. A really cool bit of technology, and I have to say that as we continue to go through this war, and some viewers cue me in on brand new technology I've never heard about, the West is really going above and beyond with the technology they have these days, and I would be interested to see, although I do not want this to happen, what a conventional war in between the Russian Federation and a country, well, the entirety of NATO, would actually look like. It would be so high-tech from the Western side, the NATO side of the war, that it'd almost be like watching, I guess you could say, one of those futuristic first-person shooter games like Call of Duty Advanced Warfare occurring in real life. We actually found out that there's some kind of a thermal heat signature blocking camo that the Swedish have developed and put onto the CV 9120, I believe. And after I saw that, the West, just by the amount of technology they have alone, would steamroll the Russians. There would almost be no question. But it's incredibly interesting to see this smart munition being used, and I hope that we continue to see more of those in Ukraine, and that the West continues to provide a large amount of them. With that, we're now moving on to the next bit of Location Unknown news, where we can see a Russian tank being hit. Hopefully the video loads. Come on, little video. It said its session couldn't load, but then it loaded. They lied to me. And so this caption, I thought the caption was hilarious on this. It says, Russian tanks seem to have possibly been hit by a javelin. Now, I want to ask you all this, because I thought it was a little difficult to see, and of course the title threw me off as well. Does it seem like the tanks were hit by a javelin in this video? I can't really tell. Let's watch that one again and see if it was. I'm not entirely sure. We can see that there was apparently some kind of a mechanical failure with the tank. It appears that the engine may have begun to combust, but I'm not entirely sure. Let me know in the chat, yes or no, was this hit by a javelin? Because I just can't tell you. It's just too difficult to find out. So with that in mind, and of course, considering that we take video evidence incredibly seriously and the titles that go along with it, it seems like these tanks may have been hit, at least one of them, but we're not entirely sure, and we'll have to have confirmation from our live chat to see if it really was, because my eyes deceive me, and while the title says that it seems to have possibly been hit, I don't think this tank got hit. I think it was actually a pretty far miss, by about a country mile. And so with that, we're now going to be moving on to the next bit of news, where we can then see a Stugna attack, which is everyone's tried and true favorite anti-tank system. We can see them, of course, lining up the Stugna here, and we can see the Russian vehicle kicking it across this field. I mean, it's actually moving pretty fast. We now see them guiding the Stugna down onto it, and it appears that it may be a truck, but it's about to become scrap. The missile is still on its way, and this truck just got turned into scrap.
Приїхав, підар. Та ти шо, красава.
Oh my god. Look how many people are filming this. We have the cameraman recording on his phone, which we're looking through, and we have a second guy over here with his phone out as well recording it. And so pretty cool to see. The Ukrainian anti-tank Stugna crews really like their job. You can tell. These guys are not cheering and celebrating like most of them in the video, and I think that's because they're trying to line up their cameras to get the best shot of the Stugna display as this missile is hitting it. And so I gotta say, the caption on this one leads us to believe that this actual Ural was hit, and I do have to agree with the caption. Now, one thing I do have to say is that we have been doing a lot of research on Stugna anti-tank systems, and I would have to say, without certainty, that the civilian-made Stugnas are far superior to the military-grade Stugnas, and of course, y'all know what I mean by that. And so with that, we're now going to be moving on to the next bit of Location Unknown News. Once again, nothing but a large amount of high notes tonight in the Location Unknown News, and in the next one, we can see a Ukrainian sniper giving Russians free naps. And so let's check this out. And of course, I'm not saying that to be cool or anything, I'm just saying that to get around YouTube's... Oh, well, I'm not getting around YouTube's community guidelines. For all intents and purposes, these Russian soldiers are just having a nice nap, and we're looking at them through our crosshairs as they prepare to go to sleep. And so with that, here's the video. We can see the Russian soldier right there. We can now see him prepare the tranquilizer dart, and it appears that the Russian has decided to have a nice nap. Now, I don't know about you, Matthew. Can you hear the audio on this video?
I actually can't. I can see it, but I can't hear it.
All right, I gotta ask you all this from the chat. This bolt, or whatever the action was on this gun, sounded meaty. And it kind of sounded like a 50 caliber's action, because it just sounded so clanky. So let me know in the chat, what do y'all think this was? If the Ukrainians were using a 50 caliber here, there is a little bit of a questionability against 50 calibers being used directly against personnel. It's technically, according to the rules of war, supposed to be used as an anti-material weapon, but I've of course heard the typical get around on that when they usually say something like, oh, I was aiming for the helmet or the bulletproof vest, considering that is a, I guess you could say, military equipment, and so they say they were targeting that, and the soldier was, of course, collateral. But anyways, I want y'all to put in the chat what y'all think it was. I'm seeing a decent amount of replies of 14.7. Hiveland Tough sales of 14.7. Some of y'all are saying it's a 50. A lot of y'all are agreeing that it was a pretty heavy bolt. It definitely sounded like one. And I gotta say, whatever that Russian soldier was hit with, he's definitely taking a very long nap. And so with that, we're now going to be moving on to the next bit of Location Unknown News, and our final bit, where we can see actual confirmation. Call up your kids, call up your parents, get them all on the stream. We saw a video confirming that M270s are being used in Ukraine and are on the ground. This was the first video we were ever able to actually confirm as being taken in Ukraine and showing an M270 in action there. This is groundbreaking. We heard that they have been sent, around 8 of them total. We did not know that they were actually in Ukraine until right now. This is the first video where we were able to confirm that the M270 videos were not from some training ground in either Fort Benning or some other country, but these are actually the fields of Ukraine, and the soldiers in this video are wearing Ukrainian uniforms. And so with that, here's the video, the first one ever of the M270 in Ukraine. We can see them here walking around, of course with a dog. Every Ukrainian unit has a dog. I kind of like that. We now see them inside the cab, looking around. Now showing off the missiles inside their tubes. Oh man, I gotta say, this is something. Is that a Stormer? Wait a minute. No, I don't think that's a Stormer. Stormer HVM. Let me. Oh man, I'm sorry about this, y'all. I gotta pull this one up. Stormer HVM. I gotta see. Okay, so images. This is definitely the same APC. But does it have the little forward sight up here? No. So it looks like it's just the normal armored personnel carrier version. But the British have also sent over... I mean, like, the only armored personnel carriers I think the British have sent over are these Stormer HVMs. And so I think that is a Stormer HVM. It's just... Huh. We're going to have to take a better look at this. Hopefully it shows it again in the video. But I'm going to flip if the British have just sent over normal, I guess you could say, Abbots? I think these things are the Abbots. Let me just pull that up. Abbott APC. No, they're not Abbots. Wait a minute, no. It's definitely... Oh, that's a Stormer HVM again. Well, come on now. I didn't get that wrong, did I? Yeah, I did get it that wrong. It's definitely not an Abbott ABC. Well, an Abbott... whatever. It's definitely not the Abbott. It's some other kind of, I guess you could say, armored troop transport that they put the Stormer HVM on. But I'm not sure if they just sent those over as is or if they were all HVMs. We now see them saying that the M270 holds 12 HIMARS missiles, twice the amount of firepower that the normal HIMARS has. And so, wait a minute, let's go back and look at that again. That doesn't look like a Stormer HVM. That actually looks like the normal British armored personnel carrier version of that APC. But we'll take a look at it again. I saw some people saying it may have been a Striker. Or a Scorpion. Scorpion, I'm not really sure about Scorpion. We now see the M270 firing off the missiles, and it is a good day for Ukraine. These things pack a punch. Of course, the normal HIMARS missile is incredibly potent and superbly accurate, but the M270 not only carries 6 of them, it carries 12 of them. And that is really the entire advantage of the M270. And that's, of course, the end of the video. But it is great to finally get that confirmation that M270s are in Ukraine and are actually being used. That's massive news for everyone in the war. And hopefully the Ukrainians can get more HIMARS and more M270s. The HIMARS do have some inherited advantages over the M270. Mostly its mobility and its speed, but the M270 has an advantage over the HIMARS, which is literally double the capacity for missiles. With that, we're now going to be moving out of the location unknown news and moving further down the line into the Kharkiv area, which we've seen a little bit of action in today. Starting off, we've seen the 131st Brigade hitting a BMD-2. Now, we've heard about BMD-4s, which I'll show you all here. That's a BMD-4. And we've also seen, now in this video, a BMD-2, which it looks really cheap. You can actually see them here. That's a BMD-4. That's BMD-2. You can see, according to the information, they were produced from 1985 to 1991. These things went out of production literally at the beginning of when the 90s kids were being born. And so, that tells you how old this tank is. These things, at a minimum, are 30 years old. And they can be older than that. And so, jeez. This is actually, this picture was actually taken at a parade in Kyiv in August of 2008. I'm not sure if the Ukrainians still use these. We can look through their inventory, but these things are old. And the Russians also use a large amount of them as well. So let's scroll down here. They apparently will show us. So the Ukrainians have 63 of these in 1995. And let's see, at least 49 BMD-2s have been captured by Russian forces during the 2022 Russian invasion of Ukraine. Interesting. So pretty much the Ukrainians do not have any more BMD-2s, but the Russians had 849 of them in active service and 1,500 of them in storage as of 2013, which gives you a pretty good idea that they're using a lot of old garbage. And so with that, here's the video of this thing getting slaughtered. When you see the Ukrainians looking for it, and there are some Russians, of course, in a pit. You see a couple of them moving around here. And there they are, the BMD-2s. Now we're getting a little bit of information on this. Let's see, armed in 1985, it was further put into operation in India, Ukraine, and Uzbekistan. A compact, well-armored vehicle equipped to carry 5 soldiers. 5? The BMD-2 is airlifted by medium military transport aircraft and can be paradropped using a rocket parachute with a platform. The vehicle is fully amphibious and is propelled in the water by 2 water jets at the rear of the hull. Nice information to know, but I don't think any of that matters because the thing just got shredded. And now we can see the Russians, in all of their brilliance and intelligence, running out of the tree line where they may have not been seen and into the wide open field. Now the BMD-2s are roasting a little bit, and the artillery continues to come down on this tree line, of course, continuing to try and wipe out the BMDs. We can see the Russians running around with complete confusion. They do not know where they're going. They're just running through the middle of the field, hoping that someone will tell them what to do. Ooh, look at that. Wait a minute. They didn't tell us that in the video. They also took out a T-72B3. And so they not only knocked out a couple of flimsy, cheap-looking BMDs, they knocked out a pretty decent main battle tank as well. There you can see a BMD, of course, sitting there destroyed. And the pits that the Russians were in beforehand, completely destroyed and smoldering. An absolute mess, and the Russian forces from that specific unit are most likely scattered all over, as we saw that they had no specific order to, I guess you could say, their route. They just started running everywhere. And so, nice to see. I'm very glad to see that this is the kind of stuff that takes over Russian units when an artillery barrage comes in. With the Ukrainians, when a barrage comes in, they get to cover and they hide. When the artillery barrage is coming on the Russians, they get up and they just run. And it doesn't matter where they're running, they're just trying to get away from wherever the explosions are. And so with that, that is the end of that video, and it's great to see that the 131st Brigade has been doing a decent bit of work and knocked out not only a couple of BMDs, but a T-72B3 as well. Sorry that my voice sounded a little bit weird there. I was talking and my teeth smacked together, and that was pretty uncomfortable. Anyways, we're moving on to the next part of the Kharkiv salient, where we can see the Ukrainian artillery cranking away. And this isn't some of your new Western artillery pieces. This is actually one of the older 2S1 systems that the Ukrainians have been using since the start of the war. And so, here's the video. You see it moving on forward. Rear hatch is open. We can see some soldiers running with the tank.
12 чоловік зараз там побачили. Розвідка наша. Зараз пташка підлетить. Почнемо по ним працювати.
Now the 2S1 is firing. Apparently they spotted about a platoon-sized amount of Russian soldiers in the distance, and they're trying to take them out. Also, notice this. Notice the amount of artillery shells that have landed in this field. This is not the first time that the Russian forces have moved through this very same area. Just in case we all did not know, and we were able to get this information from Operator Starsky a good while ago, the Russians do not revise their battle plans if they fail. They just continue to repeat the same actions over and over and over until they eventually break the Ukrainians by literally running them out of ammunition or making their positions unattainable just because of the amount of destruction and carnage that surrounds them. And that's why you'll see a massive amount of pot marks and artillery shell marks in an area where the Russians are being hit once more. This is not the first time Russians have been here, and the Ukrainians have literally been firing at them probably 3, 4, or 5 times over before we even saw this film over the course of weeks. We now see the 2S1 picking up the fire. Apparently their fire has been corrected enough to hit down on, and we now see it retreating out of the front line area.
Третій був у ціль.
They're now covering up the SPG with tree limbs to try and make sure that it's harder to spot by drone.
черга по третьому або четвертому снаряду в укриття. Четвертий снаряд ложить тільки для добивання.
Все, принял.
Ну і по концу, давай.
Только пока не выгоняй.
That's the end of the video, but it was nice to see that the Ukrainians were pouring down the fire on a Russian platoon, and apparently did hit them. We weren't able to confirm what kind of damage was caused to the unit, but assuming since an artillery shell directly hit on top of them, I would assume that there was a decent amount of people who had a nap. And so with that, we're now going to be moving on from that bit of news in the Kharkiv pocket, and we're now going to be moving down into Kharkiv city itself, where we can see an armored limo? Now, the Ukrainians are going above and beyond in terms of luxury. Apparently, it's now time for high-class firefights. They've now gotten an armored limo. This is the craziest thing I have seen. This tops everything. I've never seen anyone make an armored limo, and I've never seen one actually appear somewhere near a front line. This is something straight out of GTA 5. I don't know how to explain it. I don't know if they actually consider using this thing. I think it may just be something funny. But this is the craziest thing ever. I don't know about you, Matthew, but what are your comments on this here armored limo?
Now, that looks like something that was maybe put together in somebody's backyard with very minimal equipment and maybe some spray paint.
I gotta say, though, it is pretty interesting. Imagine the Russians at a checkpoint somewhere in the Kharkiv area, and in an olive drab limo just pulls up with a hard base just blaring out of it, and like 6 or 7 Ukrainians hop out of the back doors and just start spraying down your checkpoint. That would be the most confusion I think a Russian checkpoint could ever undergo. Oh my gosh, just imagine the silly stuff if the Russians were actually dumb enough to let this thing get close enough to them that could be pulled off with an armored limo. Now, I don't think this thing is effective by any measure. I think it's incredibly cool, and I would highly suggest driving this thing around Ukraine for fundraisers and such things like that. But in practicality, I'm not entirely sure. But still, I gotta say, I'm really impressed. I think it's pretty neat. And so with that, that's the end of the video, and I gotta say, that is some of the most interesting news we've ever seen come out of the Kharkiv area. And so with that, we're now going to be moving further down into the Luhansk area and covering that news as well. Before we get down there, though, we, of course, have to cover the Chuhiv and Balakli area. And I'm going to cover these with a blanket statement and say that nothing has happened here. No offensive or defensive actions. Now that we've covered that, we're now moving down into the Izyum area, where we see that the 3rd Brigade has hung on. And against multiple Russian assaults in their position, they continue to hold the line. Once again, huge credit to Radio Free Europe that, of course, has put out this film. They do an incredible amount of reporting. Of course, gave them a plug earlier in the stream, and I highly suggest if you're looking for a second source of news beyond my channel, they do an incredibly good job at showing video and picture evidence to back up their stories. And so with that, here is the video. You see this Ukrainian T-72B firing into the distance.
В основном россияне используют артиллерийское вооружение. Больше пока стрелковое в бой они, как правило, не вступают. А если вступают, то мелкими группами и постоянно провоцируют наших для того, чтобы ми розкривали свої позиції.
Певні спроби прощупати нашу оборону методом або розвідки боєм, або направленням певних диверсійних груп.
Oh my gosh! Oh my gosh, it's a continuation of that story. Y'all may remember this video from a long time ago where a tank, a Ukrainian tank, a lot like the movie White Tiger, took on a whole entire Russian armored column and actually knocked out a couple of the vehicles. This man, from what I'm able to collect in this video right here, this guy that they're looking at is actually the commander of that tank that pulled off that incredible stunt in the Chernihiv area early on in the war, and he's now been moved towards the Balaklia Izyum area, and he's defending that region as of right now.
Ми зайшли їм, грубо кажучи, в фланг. І вони були просто ошарашені, вони не знали, що робити. Масово тікали, випригували з того штаба. Покинули той блокпост, який ми потім рознесли в друзки. А в тому бою ми знищили 3 БТРа і 1 танчик підбили.
It's crazy to see a story continue in this war. Usually everything's always just a one-off little glimpse into one unit story or a squad story or just a quick little glimpse of a foreign legion unit. But it's insane to see that they've survived for months in this war. Pretty much this Ukrainian tank ace, and they're now in another area of the front lines, still alive to tell the tale of the incredible things they did in the early part of the war when the Russians were literally bypassing Chernihiv and trying to reach the Kyiv area. It's unbelievable to think that we're looking at that exact crew right here in this video.
Ми виїхали відпрацьовувати по позиціям русських, і там стояв танчик, який був закопаний в капонірі. Командир роти піхотний сказав мені, що навіть не старайся, ти по ньому все одно не попадеш. І ми виїхали на ту позицію, і наводчик з першого разу попав снарядом прямо в танчик, який через 1,5 дня згорів повністю. Це був Т-90.
Дімасік його позивний. Його відправили захватити певний рубіж. Москальські танки були в засідці, і їх просто почали в бік бити. Після чого Дімасіка танчик підпалили. Тоді я в своєму взводу дав команду хоча б в тому напрямку бити. Вони все-таки злякалися. Навіть потім мені повідомили, що я на осліп одну машину підбив. І слава Богу, я дуже сильно переживав. Слава Богу, що Дімасік з опіками, але вижив. І мені це дуже приємно було на душі. Яка би армія світу з нами не боролася, я все одно буду стояти на своїй думці, що наша армія – це наймогутніша, найкраща, тому що ми знаємо, чому ми тут. Ми воюємо за наші сім'ї, за наші будівки, за нашу державу. Танки в них по характеристикам кращі, але танк без людини – це ніщо. Тому люди в нас набагато краще, набагато думають і знають, чому вони тут.
За батьківщину свою, щоб ворог не дійшов до моїх рідних, щоб не творилося те, що робиться тут, а на більш рідній землі. І ця рідна, але та батьківщина моя, де я виріс. Тому не хочеться, щоб вони прийшли туди.
В душе тяжело просто. Мы стали как врагами. Просто им какую-то лапшу вешают на уши, что мы тут бендери, мы тут людей ему, что какой-то, Хай би вони посмотрели, що вони наделают.
Але в перемозі України у вас немає сумнівів?
Нет, ми переможемо. Переможемо.
I see a T-72B passing the camera with a Ukrainian flag waving on top. And a Husky. And that's the end of the video. It's impressive to see a recount of the stories of those brave Ukrainian tank aces that were knocking out Russian tanks left and right at the beginning of the war, which is so far behind us now, over 100 days ago, that it almost seems like a distant memory. But those exact same tank crews are still there on the front lines and still fighting each and every day to defend the nation of Ukraine from the Russian invaders. And I've got to say, it is honestly impressive to see that they're all still alive and well, and that they are continuing to give it to the Russians. And so with that, if we could all give them a huge Slava Ukraine in the chat, I think that if any of them were watching, or if any of them heard word or got wind of this channel, they would be heavily appreciative to know that all of us have been watching them and wish them the best of luck from here and well on into the future. And so with that, that is all the news we've gotten from the Izyum area. And of course, while it's just all of the news we've gotten, it is some of the most impressive news that we've seen, and it's great to see that those aces are still alive. Moving down into the Slovyansk area, we actually saw that Ukrainian air defenses became active overnight, and were able to shoot down what appears to be 2 Russian drones over the city. We can now see the surface-to-air missiles making their way up into the sky to hopefully take out these Russian drones. The first missile explodes, most likely knocking out a Russian drone, although we cannot confirm this for certain. We just have the explosions to go by. The second missile has now been launched and is now climbing up into the sky right behind this tree in the center of the camera. We can now see the flash of the missile as it's now veering harder to the right and more lower in altitude, once again exploding and hopefully knocking out a second Russian drone, although we're not entirely sure. We can then see a third surface-to-air missile be fired, and it appears to be climbing straight up over the city. Once again, third missile exploding, but we do not know if those drones were actually taken out. We just see that the Ukrainian air defenses are working overtime and trying to stop whatever is over the city. Hopefully we can get some confirmation tomorrow of videos and pictures of destroyed drones having fallen somewhere in the vicinity of the city, so that way we can confirm these losses on film and picture. Sorry, I stuttered there. I was trying to think those aren't really films. Those would be more so of a picture. But still, impressive to see, and then the video repeats in a second time. With that, we're now going to be moving on to the news down in Kramatorsk, and we have 2 separate pieces. Starting off, we can see that another house was hit, at least a series of houses, and 2 families were left homeless after this missile impact left their houses in flames. As far as we know, no one was injured or killed, although we don't have any information specifically attached to this video to say otherwise. All we know is that 2 families were displaced by this explosion and ensuing fires in the houses, and hopefully they'll be able to find a place to live or stay, and nothing worse will happen to them as the war goes on. Moving on down further south in Kramatorsk, we can see this unknown group. I don't really know exactly who they are, but I do have to say that they are doing an incredibly wonderful deed for the rest of Ukraine. These Ukrainians here have taken it upon themselves in the city of Kramatorsk to gather up supplies to then hand out to Ukrainians that are closer to the front lines and may be in a worse situation. And so here's the video of what they've done to help out their country.
My name is Ina. I'm from Kramatorsk, Ukraine. It's in 20 kilometers from the front line. Today my family received food packages from World Central Kitchen. Thanks to them, my family doesn't hunger. Here is milk, oil, sugar, flour, bread, yeast, sausages, couscous, tea, cookie, chickpeas, paste, cheese, pasta, and some other canned goods.
One thing that I found really funny was these cookies in American style with chocolate chips. I found that title to be just humorous to me, to think that there are, of course, European-style cookies, and that's what's common in Ukraine. And so a normal chocolate chip cookie here in the United States, Canada, and Mexico, I believe, which also has a similar chocolate chip cookie, I believe, is called cookies in American style. Honestly, for some reason, I just find that funny. But it's good to know that they are getting aid, and as far as we know, this aid was sent over by, of course, Good Samaritans all around the world, of course, like the Leaf Spring Army is made up of, and then this was sent by Ukrainians to the Ukrainians closer to the front lines, and we can see what they received here in this video. It's great to see that they've gotten a lot of the basic necessities to keep themselves going, and flour, while appearing to be simple on the surface, is a vital supply to give people who may be limited in their abilities to make food. As long as you have yeast to, I guess you could say, man, I forgot the name, ferment with the flour, you can make bread. And if you can make bread, you will survive. Now, there's an old saying that man cannot live by bread alone, but he can also not live without it. And so while bread is not the only thing you need to survive, it is critically important in at least maintaining life in some way. And so it's great to see that the people who are sending this out do know what the Ukrainians will need to survive, and hopefully in the future they will not only get what they need to survive, but that what they need to thrive, as the Russians will eventually be pushed out and everything will hopefully return back to normal within the next few years. With that, we're now going to be moving out of the Kramatorsk area and closer to the Lysychansk front lines, where we can see the 22nd Brigade bombarded some Russians today. Hopefully, one of those sick Russian nuts, lunatics that was in the Severodonetsk area that we saw the other day. When you see them here pointing out some Z cars. And now see the Russians moving around, and of course the Ukrainians doing their very, I guess you could say, diligent job of labeling everything they're about to be firing at. We can now see a T-64BM in the tree line. We can now see it firing. The shells then traveling down range and slamming into these buildings which the Russians are occupying. We see a Russian Z vehicle there in that garage, and they didn't hide it well. In fact, it's almost like deliberately pointing out to a drone, I'm Russian and I'm here. The tank shell then slams nearby to that building, but we don't know how many Russians may have been wounded or went to sleep inside. You see that this tank is continuing to lay down the fire on the area. And it's switching up its targets a little bit as now shells are landing onto this other house somewhere nearby. With that, that's the end of the video, and it's great to see that the Ukrainians are laying down the fire on the Russians somewhere in the Lysychansk area, and hopefully we'll keep them at bay. We don't know of any large offensive actions occurring by the Russians here. It still appears that they're trying to regroup and reorganize, and so I don't think we'll be seeing any large offensives here in this area, especially considering that the Ukrainians have put a substantial pressure on the Kherson front, which is most likely diverting a lot of the Russians' time, attention, and resources. With that, we're now going to be moving further down the line and into the Popasna area, where you can see that the Russians got bombleted. That's right, I've come up with a new word. Much like some people say you got gauntleted, which no one's ever said until now as well, I say that these Russians got bombleted. And so here's a Russian tank getting bombleted. And a Ukrainian song. We can now see the bomblet falling down towards the tank, and boom. A Russian has now taken a nap. The other Russian here is crawling around the tank to go look at the other soldier and see that he is taking a nap. This T-80BV was apparently knocked out. The crew is at least knocked out. The tank appears to still be operational. That is a good thing for Ukraine, because if they are able to push up to this area, that means they get a free T-80BV minus the crew. And so hopefully that is the case, because if so, the Ukrainians just nabbed themselves a brand new tank. Well, we're now going to be moving out of the Popasna area and further down to our last bit of news in the Luhansk region, which is in Svitlodarsk, where we saw that some Mista S's were destroyed today on film as well. The Russians, of course, have been taking large losses pretty much everywhere. We hear some copyrighted music there, and we can now see the drone looking down into the tree line and checking out all of these Mista S's, all 4 of them that are sitting right here. And I do have to agree with everyone in chat while we watch this destruction of the Mista S's that Russians take a massive amount of naps. It almost seems like a lot of them have narcolepsy, and maybe there's some kind of medicine for that. I would hate to know that all of them fall asleep in the middle of fighting or when a bomblet goes off, because for some reason they just never can control themselves. They're a lot like those goats that seize up whenever they get scared. And whenever artillery or gunfire starts rocketing and ricocheting all around them, they always just fall over and go to sleep. I just think it's the weirdest thing. Astro Gremlin just said, why the fakey radio guy voice? I gotta read that one, Matthew. I just saw you deleted it. I think you may have banned him as well. But did you attend the Connecticut School of Broadcasting? I don't think you realize it. Did you ban him, Matthew?
Yes, I'm trying to.
All right. I don't think he realizes, but that's literally just my normal voice. If you hear me off stream, I sound a lot like this. But the artillery's coming in on the Mr. Etzes, and it looks like they're not having a fun time. And now I see a lot of people, now that I made the American ship style comments, some people are like, yes, everyone loves American junk food. Some people are like, no, we hate it. Honestly, I've had some food from all around the world, and it's not that bad. But we can now see a Mr. S burning up on the ground, and when a Mr. S catches on fire, these things can go nuclear. They have massive artillery rounds in them with propellant, and if these things explode, they go up like Roman candles. We weren't able to confirm that any more than just one of them was completely knocked out, but it is great to see that just another SPG, another Mr. S, was wiped out. We don't even know how much these things cost, but let's pull that up and let's find out. Mr. S cost. Let's see here. Maybe we can get an answer from Wikipedia. Let's see here. I want to find a cost. I want to find a price. Let's see. Ah, man, I don't think they're going to give us one, are they? Dang. You gotta be kidding me. They're not going to give us a cost on this thing. Apparently the Ukrainians have 40 of them. Cool. I didn't know that. I thought they had none of them. They're not really... Okay, let's see. A Mista. It was $3 million for a Mista in 2014, so they're very comparable to the price of a main battle tank. So we just watched $3.5 million go up in flames right there. That's, of course, a massive house on the beach. That could be 1 month's rent in California, or about the price of 3 tanks of gas. And so with that, great to see that another Mr. S was knocked out. And with that, we are on out of the Luhansk region. So with that, we're now going to be moving on to our final bits of news for the night in the Donetsk region and the remainder of the southern front. But before we get there, we're of course going to take a quick pause and answer 3 questions from the chat. And after we answer those 3 questions, we're then going to cover our last bits of news. But before we do that, I would actually like to address the poll that we got here on stream. And so with that, take it away, Matthew.
All right. So the question was, considering the recession, should the U.S. continue to provide funding for Ukraine? And first up, I saw some people in the live chat saying that we are not in a recession. But according to the definition, we actually are. I know there's some, political word games being played about that, but we are in a recession. So the results were 81% of you said that yes, we can afford it. A very clear win for that option. 14% said maybe it's a dynamic situation, and only 5% said no, we cannot afford it.
Now, I would like to say that that's a really interesting poll. I have to say it's, in fact, the most interesting poll I've seen, because surprisingly enough, I was actually, with this specific video I got from a friend today about Tucker Carlson, actually showed him talking about polling-wise, a majority, in fact, the overwhelming majority of Americans, it was somewhere over 80%, did not want more support to be sent to Ukraine. They wanted inflation to be fixed, and for some reason, stopping the spending of money on support for Ukraine is somehow going to fix our inflation issues, which I found to be a very interesting little idea there, because not getting too much into it, but I think the multi-trillion-dollar bills that were passed in between 2020 to now is what's largely been causing inflation to skyrocket as of right now. That's kind of what's been causing it, because in between the past 3 years, from 2020 to now, we had the... Golly, man, I'm trying to think of the numbers, but I think there was a $2.3 trillion stimulus package passed. That money came out of nowhere. There was also a $1 trillion infrastructure bill that was passed. There was another $1.4 trillion stimulus package bill. And all of this money, and then now we're not getting into the political side of things with what party did what and who's to blame and all that, but really both parties have been doing this ever since 2020. That kind of spending and pulling the money from no taxpayer base and pretty much getting that through foreign lending or just coming up with the money out of nowhere is the number one reason that inflation is starting right now, is due to pretty much rampant government spending that cannot be accounted for through taxes or normal foreign lending. That's the number one reason. You can try and explain it any way you want, of course. In the political world, it's never just looked at that way. In the clinical way that's actually causing it, it's going to be thrown at some political party because they did something or someone else did this. And to just touch on politics for a second, that is literally the reason that inflation is skyrocketing right now, because it was under control for a bit. We were able to kind of cook the books in a way for a while to make it look like we weren't making this money up out of thin air. But if you go back to the early COVID times in 2020, the Fed literally said, we've come up with a new way to pay for this stuff. We just print the money. That's literally what they said. I think Matthew can actually back that up for me because he's more into the Fed than I am.
Yes, they just simply turn on the money printer and start printing the money, and the inflation will follow. It always happens, and it happened this time too.
And that's been something that does have a historical precedent. A lot of y'all may know Zimbabwe, or, for example, Venezuela, which has now overtaken them. But in Zimbabwe, the government's principle was that we're running out of money, just print more money. And so now they have $1 trillion bill, and the $1 trillion Zimbabwean bill is still less than an American dollar. And that kind of gives you an idea of how printing money out of thin air to pay for things is, of course, detrimental and can lead to currency being completely worthless. On top of that, there was also a lot of economic and political issues going on in Zimbabwe around that same time. But it does give you a pretty good idea of how this stuff can take place. The main way to combat the inflation right now, looking at it from a clinical perspective, not weighing in on this politically, would be to cut government spending massively. That's really the only way to combat this issue, or at least curtail the amount of lending. And of course, the Fed's already trying to work on mitigating this. But and then the other thing, talking about economics in a very clinical perspective, there's always a recession that usually happens every 10 years from each other. There was a recession in the 60s. There was well, not a large one, but there was something of a recession in the 60s. A decent one in the 70s. There was a little bit of a recession in the 80s. A somewhat okay one in the 90s. Of course, everyone knows the 2008 recession, which was one of the largest ones since the Great Depression. And then after 2008, we really didn't have a recession. We kind of had one because of COVID, but the situation revolving around COVID really made that more of an anomaly more than a recession. And then now, the 10-year cycle has kind of caught up, even been extended by a considerable bit due to the COVID pandemic, and kind of how the books were cooked at that time by everyone involved. And so now we've gotten to the point where the recession has now caught up. The recession will happen, and I usually just consider that normal economic motion. It's not always going to be the end of the world. This is kind of the economy cleansing itself, I guess you could say, for the next 10 years of activity. So I wasn't really concerned about it.
Enforcer, I will say, I saw a comment in the live chat. Somebody said, how about the rest of the world? We aren't the only people going through money issues. And I have heard that. I do know specifically about the United States. We have been printing money like rampant. However, I'm not really educated enough to say for certain what's going on overseas. But if I had to take a guess, I would probably say because the entire global economy is kind of connected to the United States economy in a way. But I'm not too confident about that opinion. So maybe if somebody wants to educate me in the live chat, I'd be curious to know what everybody thinks on that.
And so with that, we're now going to move on from the poll to the questions. We're going to answer 3 questions from the chat. Hopefully we can get a lot of discussions going on. And I don't want it to get to political, please. I ask everyone to keep American political parties and that kind of stuff out of it, and just talk about it from a clinical economic perspective, and not really try and, I guess you could say, sully the waters with American politics, because that usually goes south incredibly fast. So with that, we're on to the first question.
All right, and the first question is from Vlad, who puts in a $40 super chat and says, great work as always, guys. Question to both of you, what is your favorite coffee drink, and what do you like to have with it? And I'll answer for myself first, and I think the answer is going to be the same for the enforcer. I like to drink a thing called Busy Cold Brew. I get it from Publix, and I don't put anything in it. I just drink it straight up, just a small amount of it because it's super potent, and it never fails to wake me up.
And I would have to agree, it's not necessarily my favorite drink to drink, but it is the one that does get the job done. Maybe we'll get a sponsorship someday from them, but it is Busy Nitro Cold Brew, the best cold brew that there ever is. It tastes like dirt, but it does get you awake, and so therefore the job is done. You can of course make it taste nice, but I never do that. I like to suffer in that specific instance. And so with that, thank you so much for the support, Vlad. I hope that does answer the question, and thank you for helping this channel to keep on running. Without viewers who help to support this channel, it wouldn't be possible. And so thank you once again. It helps us to keep those lights on, and I give this speech to everyone, but I feel like it's incredibly important to let you know how you're actually helping our channel to keep moving on and moving forward. And so with that, thank you once again for the support, Vlad. I hope that does answer your question, and we're on to the next one.
And up next, I want to give a shout out to Tyler Waycott for putting in a very generous $40 super chat without a comment. Thank you very much, Tyler, for your support, and thank you for watching the channel. I know you've been around for, I would say a very long time, but I think you've been around for a while. So it's good to have you, and I'm sure the Enforcer would like to add a few words to that.
And yes, I would. I would like to thank you very much, Tyler, for the support. Although you didn't attach a comment, and we always love to try and respond to all super chats in a way. Since you didn't leave one, I'm going to give you the spiel. Of course, you've helped to support this channel and keep us running, and y'all are the only thing, and no pressure, I want to say this, no pressure on anyone, but y'all are the only thing that keeps this channel running, and I got to thank you so much for the generous support, because with it, we'll be able to keep the news going and look into the future. Of course, we're, once again, just letting everyone know, we will be ending the Ukraine war summaries here on Sunday. The last one will air on Sunday afternoon. Unfortunately, due to burnout issues, I'm not really wanting to continue them on, and hopefully after a little bit of a break, maybe a week-long break from making the summaries, which will drastically cut down my workload daily, I'll start focusing on trying to pump out more news from around the world. We're actually thinking about trying to cover the situation in between Taiwan and China, and maybe even other kinds of international topics that could cross our mind. Not only that, but I'm thinking about covering just generalized topics that are historical or informational, kind of like the government cheese video, but on anything. It may pertain to war, economics, transportation, diplomacy, and such things like that. And so with that, I thank you once again so much for the support, Tyler, because with that, we'll be able to focus on those things in the future and also keep these war streams running. And so with that, we are on to the next one, and thank you once again.
And up next, we have a $20 super chat from channel legend Kaltenberg, who says, "Keep a stiff upper lip, lads."
And thank you so much for the support, Kaltenberg. You've been around forever. And of course, we're going to try and keep a stiff upper lip. Wow, I just messed that up. I said a stiff upper lip. Oh, wait. We'll always try and keep a stiff upper lip, Kaltenberg. And thank you once again so much for the support. Helps us run this channel tremendously. And you've been around for quite a considerable while, helping us to make sure to keep the lights on, keep everything churning, and always look into the garage for our Jaguar. And so with that, thank you once again for the support, Kaltenberg. We appreciate it so much, and I'm glad to know that we always have a longtime channel viewer, Lee Spring Army veteran, and supporter in you. And so thank you once again, Kaltenberg, for the support. And with that, we're going to move on to the final question of this segment, and then we're going to move on into the remainder of the news for the night.
All right, and the final one of this segment is from Smokey Valdez, who puts in a $20 super chat and says, "Drive the orcs into the pits of hell."
And thank you so much for the support, and I hope that the Ukrainians do drive the orcs into the pits of hell. It always feels weird kind of calling them orcs, but, you know, kind of had to go with what everyone's calling them these days, and I would have to agree with that. I hope that they eventually do such a thing. And now, one thing that I see, and thank you once again for the support, and I hope I did answer that comment. One thing I would like to share with you is that I just did a British impression just a second ago, an English impression, really, and I saw someone say, of course, horrible impersonation. Thank you, Sour Vodka, for the support there. And then someone said,
Sour Vodka is keeping it real.
Yeah, Sour Vodka is keeping it real. Bill Russell said, sounds like Winston Churchill voice. I mean, like, thank you for the compliment, but I wouldn't agree on that one. And then Dan said, that accent is dead on correct. If you're British, I thank you very much for that. And if, let's see, if Sour Vodka is British, I'm sorry. I'm really sorry. I really like your country. I think it's a neat place. I'm like 90% British DNA-wise, so I'm like about as British as one can get. But still, if it was bad, very sorry in advance. And so with that, We are going to move on to the final segment of news. If you have sent in a super chat tonight, don't worry, we will get to all of them, and we'll cover every single one of them. We do that every single night without fail. And just for those of y'all that don't know, there's always an insurance kind of policy with super chats. If for some reason the stream went down and was not able to come on tonight, we will get on either in the middle of the day tomorrow to answer all of the super chats from tonight, or we will answer all of them in a marathon tomorrow. So never fret. We will always make sure to address everyone who helps to keep this channel running, and also answer any questions that were thrown in as well. And so with that, we're now going to move into the Donetsk area and cover the remainder of the news. Starting off behind the lines in the area of Izyum, we saw an ammo depot get decimated by a Ukrainian HIMARS attack. Here's the video. You see a little bit of an explosion going on over there, and I gotta say, that is an explosion. Thank you, Sour Vodka. I thank you very much for loving us regardless. Don't want to make you cringe, but still. And we can see that that was one of the 12 that was destroyed today. We were able to confirm a decent amount of them on film, but we weren't able to confirm all of them. But this was certainly one of the nice ones that snapped, crackled, and popped for us on film. With that, we're now going to move on to the next bit of news, closer to the front lines and within the Donetsk area of the city itself, further north in the town of Yasnuvata. Now, guess what happened, everyone? You see the fire symbol on this marker? What do you think happened? It's another ammo depot burning? And that's right. The Ukrainians hit another ammo depot, this time much closer to the front lines. You can see the fire out there in the distance. You know, if Mark Zuckerberg saw a fire like that, he would be drooling at the mouth because there are so many meats that could be smoked over that fire. It's unbelievable. With that, we're now going to be moving out of that area. Once again, another ammo depot destroyed. The largest day in the Ukraine war for the sheer number of depots destroyed. And we're now going to move to the area of Avdiivka, where we can see an unlucky Russian. And I think y'all kind of get where this title is heading. Of course, they're playing a song. We can see the Mavic taking off with a bomblet. You know, I think the DJI company has gotten so much PR from both sides, both the Russians and the Ukrainians in this war, because both sides have been using DJIs the entire time. You can now see the Russian down there. It appears that he may have had a little bit of a difficult time. We can see him right there. And he then tilts up and he decides that he's going to try and take out the drone. He fires at it, but it appears that he misses. It appears that he misses, and then the drone ensures that a letter will be sent to his missus telling her that she will be the winner of a brand new white Lada model 2022 made this year. That's the end of the video, and a pretty interesting one at that. Beyond these three videos, we have not gotten, of course, news of any offensive or defensive actions occurring from either side in the Donetsk area. Rather than the Ukrainians apparently pushing into the Kievsky district of Donetsk city just by a little and getting out of the airport, we haven't heard any news beyond that, so it's been nearly 3 weeks to a month of inactivity in this area from both sides. The line has remained static, and most likely will stay this way until the very end of the war. Moving on past the southern front, which has had absolutely nothing to report today, the front has been completely quiet. We're now going to move over to the Dnipro Reservoir, just north of Novokakhovka. This entire reservoir is held back by the dam down here at Novokakhovka. Up here in Nikopol, we were able to see today that the Russians shelled the city. We're not sure how many civilian casualties were involved, but the barrage did seem a little sizable, and it was made up of incendiary ammunition. When you see the incendiary munitions raining down on the town, and we do not know what kind of damage has been caused by this barrage. Well, that's the end of the video, and of course an unfortunate instance occurring in Nikopol. Hopefully no one was injured or killed, but of course that is holding out a little bit too much hope. Well, someone was most likely injured. Moving on down to the last bit of news we've got, and we can see that explosions were reported in the area of the town of Kamyanka-Dniprovska, which is just near the Inhydar power plant, confirming that the Ukrainians knocked out another ammo depot in the southern front, kind of near the Kherson area, but not quite. It's more so in the southern front, Zaporizhia area of the front line. But it is impressive to see that on film alone, we were able to confirm multiple losses of ammo depots and also a Russian army base inside of Bryansk. And I gotta say, with these kinds of losses supply-wise, the Russians will not be able to last for long if these kinds of losses kept up daily. And so with that, we have covered all of the frontline news. We're now going to move up to our final bit of news to cover for the night, which is the speech from President Volodymyr Zelenskyy. And so, without further ado, here is President Zelensky's speech. And I'll just pop this up here, and here's the video.
Українки, наші захисники, захисниці. Повертаємося з Одеської області. Зокрема, зустрічався сьогодні з нашими героями, бійцями сил спеціальних операцій. Подякував їм за службу, нагородив найкращих, наголосив на тому, що головне їхнє завдання, щоб у ворога не було жодної спокійної хвилини на цій землі. Земля має горіти під ногами. Кожен окупант, який знущається з українців, який катує, вбиває, повинен знати, що відплата за це буде. Навіть якщо хтось з російських вбивць сподівається, що нібито їх не притягнуть до відповідальності, що вони нібито десь ховаються, хай знають, вони будуть відповідати в будь-якому випадку. Географія, час, кордони, стіни не зупинять справедливу відплату. Заслухав сьогодні доповіді про удар окупантів на Оленівці Донецької області. Це був свідомий російський воєнний злочин, свідоме масове вбивство українських військовополонених, більше 50 загиблих, коли оборонці Азовсталі виходили з заводу, ООН і Міжнародний комітет Червоного Хреста виступили гарантами життя, здоров'я наших воїнів. Збройні сили України, Служба безпеки, Головне управління розвідки і Уповноважений Верховної Ради України виступили зі спільною заявою до ООН, Червоного Хреста як гарантів тих домовленостей щодо захисників Азовсталі. Підтримую цю заяву. Зараз гаранти повинні реагувати, повинні захистити життя сотень українських військовополонених. І додам від себе, має бути чітке юридичне визнання Росії державою-спонсором тероризму. Особливо зараз я звертаюся до Сполучених Штатів Америки. Рішення потрібне. Потрібне зараз. Росія довела численними терактами, що є найбільшим джерелом тероризму в сьогоднішньому світі. Це факт. Українська дипломатія винесла інформацію про російський удар по Оленівці на найвищий міжнародний рівень. Радбез ООН поінформований. Усі учасники міжнародних відносин знатимуть, що відбулося насправді. Росії нікого не вдасться обманути. Так само міжнародна спільнота поінформована про усі деталі нашої протидії російському терору, голодом. Сьогодні в Одесі почалась конкретна робота по відновленню експорту українського зерна. Це важливо. Важливо не тільки з точки зору економічної міцності нашої держави, яка потрібна, щоб вистояти у цій війні. Це важливо для того, щоб світ вистояв під тиском продовольчої кризи. Чим більше українського зерна буде на світовому ринку, тим більше стабільною буде ситуація у наших партнерів. А отже, тим більше ефективною буде і наша спільна протидія державі-терористу. Підкреслюю, терорист. Не хочу зараз нічого прогнозувати. Подивимось, як будуть виконуватись домовленості щодо зернового експорту, ООН, Туреччина і інші міжнародні партнери відповідають за безпекову сторону цього процесу. Все, що необхідно для захисту нашого узбережжя, робиться Збройними силами України. Я хочу сказати сьогодні ще одне. Російський терор направлений передусім на те, щоб зламати нашу внутрішню силу. Росія нічого не може зробити з нами на полі бою. Наші оборонці дуже міцні. Такими ж міцними маємо бути і ми з вами. Наші емоції, наша спільна воля боротись повинні бути сильними до самої нашої перемоги. Щоб не робило окупантів. Як би вони не намагались зламати наш дух, ми повинні триматись, бути мобілізованими і повністю зосередженими на тому, що необхідно для нашої перемоги. Якщо хтось із вас відчуває, що не витримує те зло, яке бачить, подумайте, як ще ви особисто можете допомогти обороні України. Допомагайте ЗСУ, доносьте світу факти про російський терор і переконуйте усіх, кого знаєте в країнах-партнерах, щоб збільшували допомогу Україні. Ми обов'язково переможемо, але до цього треба дійти нам всім разом. Вічна пам'ять усім жертвам російського терору. Вічна слава кожному і кожній, хто знищує цих окупантів. Слава Україні!
And with that, that is the end of the speech from President Zelenskyy and wraps out day 156 of the news and the past 24 hours of the war in Ukraine. If you've been watching tonight and you were here for the news alone, please make sure to like, comment, and subscribe. We do run these streams every single day of the week except for Mondays at 10 p.m. Eastern Time, covering the past 24 hours of the war in Ukraine. Now, with that in mind, we're now going to be moving into the question segment, and we're going to answer all of the super chats, every single super chat, and we're going to answer as many of the live chats as possible. And so with that, we actually saw some interesting results on that poll, and also I saw that it caused a little bit of contention in the chat. And so before we move into the questions, if you'd like to cover that, Matthew, please feel free.
All right, so the poll that I put up was kind of a funny one. I said, which impersonation does the enforcer do best? But I actually did not mean to say impersonation. I meant to say impression, as somebody pointed out in the live chat. But up first, we have a 40% for Mike Tyson. We have 25% for Stoffel the honey badger, which I actually completely made up. The enforcer has never imitated a honey badger on the stream before. And we have a 19% President Zelenskyy and 14% British citizen.
Man, British citizen got freaking rejected down there, 14%. But Mike Tyson with 40%, not bad. I saw a lot of people, of course, the opponents of the impressions are incredibly vocal. I mean, goodness, it's like there's a decent few people who do not like the impressions, and they make it clear. So with that, we're now going to move on from the poll. Not really going to talk about too much. It was an interesting one, though. And with that, we are now going to move on into our question segment. And also, I would like to address a comment from one of our viewers that I just saw that I think is worthy of approaching. I just saw someone called Laszlo Uriel say, with all the politics here tonight, I'm unmotivated to watch the rest. And I don't know.
I saw that too.
Yeah, and
I
ahead,
have to say real quick before you say enforcer, what we've been discussing about economics is not political. It's just simple fact. So we're not trying to get political. That's not our objective. And I'm going to let the enforcer take it from here as I kind of interrupted him a little bit.
And it's perfectly fine. What I'm about to say is pretty much on the same lines. And I'd also like to make something clear. Now, I try and keep we actually successfully have kept politics out of the stream for 156 days. And the closest we ever get to talking about politics may be an equal critique on the entire ordeal on both parties. And we never make it an attack on one or the other. We always try and say and see that both sides have fair points if we ever bring them up, and they also both have disadvantages. We have not brought up politics tonight by any way, shape, or form whatsoever. We talked about economics, and I have to say, because I try and be incredibly reasonable with my responses, but I think that was about as far off base as one could possibly get, considering that none of this touched on politics whatsoever. And so for some reason, it was a little bit too much for you to clinically talk about not politics, but economics and the economic system and the inflation that's going on here in the United States. I'm at a loss for you. I don't even know where to go with that. So with that, we're now going to be moving on to the questions and moving on from that. And so with that, we are on to the next one.
All right, and first up from the live chats, we have a $20 super chat from Ken, who says, here is some money for all the therapy you will need in the future because of this war.
Well, thank you very much for the support. It's a straightforward statement. Hopefully I'll be able to get by without therapy. I've never actually seen a psychiatrist or anything, for that matter, in my life. If I have a traumatic event, I just cope, really. So with that, thank you so much for the support. Just in case if I do need it, I thank you so much for getting us a little fun going there, and hopefully $50 will cover all that I need. And so with that, thank you once again for the support. I hope that does answer the comment. And with that, we are on to the next one.
And up next, we have a $20 super chat from Bass Girl, who says, how will the USA keep up with the HIMARS rockets for Ukraine since only 9,000 are produced yearly? You guys are awesome. Thank you for the work you and Matt do every day, and I love you guys. And Bass Girl, thank you so much for the compliments and the praise. We appreciate you very much.
And I thank you so much once again, Bass Girl, for the support. And to answer that question, that's actually a very good point. Only 9,000 missiles are produced, but we also need to consider how big of a stockpile does the U.S. have. U.S. HIMARS missile inventory. I'm not sure if they would give a public figure on that. I feel like that's something that would be hidden deep within the Department of Defense as the actual figures. Well, let's see if we can get a number here for the amount of rockets that they would have. So let's see here. Let's get all that. Copy. All right, so we got the rocket. Let's paste that in and see about these specific rockets. Oh god, it's the Vault Company. Alright, moving down in here. This is 2006, so it's a little dated, but hopefully it'll give us some figures of what they had then. I don't think it will. Yep, it won't. Don't think so. Yeah. Don't see anything specific. Wait a minute. So the XM31 variant, and in 2006, the Army had plans to procure up to 100,000 rounds. And so we're producing 9,000 a year, and we actually have about 100,000 of them in inventory. We will have a decent amount to work off of before we start to get to critically low amount of stocks. And if need be, of course, the Department of Defense can allocate more funds to an increased production of weaponry like these rockets here. So in that sense, while the production may be around 9,000, it appears that we may have a sizable stockpile of missiles that we can call upon to be sent to Ukraine and also to work off of until we get to a number that's low enough that we then have to start considering maybe ramping up production. Usually the answer to not meeting demand is always increasing production, and so if the Army ever starts to run low on, say, Javelin missiles, Javelin CLUs, XM30 rockets, they will always just go to upping the production and making sure that they can keep a sizable inventory of them. And so with that, I hope that does answer the question, and thank you once again so much, Bass Girl, for being a longtime veteran of the Lee Spring Army, and also helping us to keep this channel running. And with that, we are going to move on to the next question, and thank you once again for the support.
And next up, we have a $20 super chat from none other than BC Skyman, who says, I will go ahead and make this statement. I used to listen to Tucker occasionally, but he was 100% wrong about Ukraine. And yes, he did say pro-Russian statements.
And I thank you very much for the support, BC Skyman. And I see some people here in the chat, and I found that's pretty interesting. So let me address this real quick before I address your comment. Talking about Tucker Carlson and saying that he is a pro-Russian sympathizer is not political. That is straight up fact. If you watch his program, he makes it clear the seething hatred he has for the Ukrainian government. He's also wished the Russians well. And not only is he such a pro-Russian that I claim it on this channel, but Russian state TV has also quoted him on multiple occasions and considers him, as what they say, a role model American. And so in that regard, not touching on any of his other political standpoints, he is anti-Ukraine and pro-Russian, and in that aspect alone, we speak of him. I've got to say, I'm trying to keep my responses to these kinds of statements as polite as possible. But with this one, Tucker Carlson is pro-Russian. We do not touch on his politics, whatever political alignment he has here in the United States. And if for some reason the mention of a pro-Russian news reporter here in the United States is too much for you, then this channel might not be for you. I'm just going to say that as about as clear as possible, because I try and work around those kinds of things. But if one is going to be that obstinate that even mentioning someone's name like that in a Ukraine war standpoint, not touching on anything else, is far too much for them to handle, then I'm really at a loss, because I can't control what I say to that point where I can't even touch on it. And so with that, I hope that addresses that little bit of a schism that I saw in the chat happen for a second. And now to move on to your comment, BC, it's okay. A lot of people, of course, have been watching mainstream news for years. And so, of course, most people have run upon a lot of the famous names out there in the reporting world. And I'm just happy to know that news reporting on YouTube is starting to take a little bit more of a stride. And we're starting to see, I guess you could say, more honest reporting come from the internet. Maybe it'll be the new form of reporting. Hopefully so. I do believe that there are a lot of news sources out there like Radio Free Europe that are definitely leading the way in pretty reliable news coverage, and especially backing it up with film and footage to show it. And I do think that it's perfectly fine. I mean, like, there's no big deal. I've on occasion watched everyone. I've watched everyone from CNN to Fox to occasionally MSNBC and a couple of the other networks. So I completely understand, and I thank you once again for the support and helping this channel to keep on running. And so with that, thank you once again, BC, and we're going to move on to the next question.
All right, and next up, we have a $20 super chat from Tito McLovin, who says, in August, everybody gets what they want. The U.S. Speaker of the House gets hero status as a martyr. U.S. gets payback and sinks 2 planned ships. With 600 planned sailors lost, Xi saves face, but does not escalate because China loves money more than war.
And I do have to agree, and I think that's one thing that everyone's always throwing out of the equation with the Chinese is their form of expansion. Usually when people think of historical expansion, we always think of the militaristic form of expansion, like a lot of the colonial powers did in the 1800s, for example. Well, actually, that's actually a pretty interesting thing, because if you think about it, the British, in forming the British Empire, did something very similar to what the Chinese were doing today. They didn't really march through Africa and just defeat you know, the Africans and then, of course, take over their land. They actually did a very interesting little bit of a political dance with everyone that became a part of the British Empire. And of course, this wasn't the same across the board. There was always a couple of instances where it wasn't. But for example, in the Sudanese areas, the British would send in, I don't know what you really call them, agents, I guess you could say, who would reach these tribes, contact them, and then they would tell them, well, you are, of course, a very powerful and an impressive king, and the British would love to have a lot of interaction with you. And so, if you would like, just say that this land is owned by the British. We will provide protection and support to you, and you can keep in charge. And so, the British had this kind of colonial system called indirect rule. Now, this was not the same for everyone. The Belgians were just, well, King Leopold II, I won't throw this on all of the Belgians, but King Leopold II of Belgium in owning the Congo was a totally different story, which is a thing for the other time. But that's largely how they would control a large amount of their empire, including India as well. Although in India, eventually it did get centralized into the British Raj, and that was mostly because of revolts and clashes that the Indians and the British would have, which eventually led to the collapse of the East India Company and the formation of the British Raj, which in the future would lead to the most interesting thing that's ever occurred, which would be the hatred that the Indians have for the Pakistanis and the Pakistanis have for the Indians, because it was largely kept under control under the British Raj. But once the British Raj became an independent country completely separate from British rule as India, the Pakistanis broke off immediately, and the Pakistanis, being largely Muslim, have an absolute resentment for the largely Hindi Indians, and they still do to this day. And that's the reason why both of them have nuclear arms, is because they're trying to aim them at each other, pretty much. But with that, I hope that kind of weighs in on the colonial side of things. And now to get to the Chinese kind of grow in the same way. They'll go to all of these countries around the world, mostly in the underdeveloped areas like Africa and the Middle East, and also Central Asia. For example, they did this recently with Afghanistan, and they'll go, hey, I see that you're pretty new and you look like a cool country, a bunch of cool cats in there. What if we built like a train station for you or gave you a loan? Yeah, that would be nice, wouldn't it? And we'll give that to you free of charge. And then they'll give it to them. Then, of course, it's not free of charge. They'll have to pay interest on it. And these loans are usually so high in interest, or they're just unpayable for these countries, that they have to default. And then the Chinese, through that defaulting of the loan, pretty much get direct influence on how those economies start to play out, and therefore, by controlling a decent portion of their economy or a vital part of their infrastructure, they get a large amount of say on what goes on in those countries, and they pretty much take these nations hostage. That's kind of how the Chinese have been expanding, and they can't do that with Taiwan. Taiwan is an economically successful country, and of course the Taiwanese and the Chinese have a direct pretty much rivalry with each other, if you'd like to call it that. And so there's really no way for the Chinese to entrap the Taiwanese like they've done other countries by giving them some kind of loan or paying to improve their infrastructure or something like that. And so it's really... It's a whole entire different conundrum for the Chinese. They've never really had to deal with expansion or a problem like this before. And so while it does seem like military expansion would be the thing that the Chinese would do, they've never done that before. And it's something completely out of their modern playbook, and it would shred apart the current expansion system they have working, which is off of their economic expansion model. And so I don't think they will invade Taiwan for that reason, but once again, it didn't make sense for Russia to invade Ukraine, yet they did, and so I'm kind of on the fence with China. They might do something like that, but it would throw everything else they've done into the wind, pretty much. And so with that, I hope that does answer the comment in a way, and I thank you once again so much for the support. And with that, we are on to the next one.
All right, and next up, we have a 20... Well, first of all, I want to say to Mark Hodges in the live chat, yes, you are correct, but actually, WF2U beat you to it. But yes, good job on that as well. And moving on to the next super chat, we have a $20 super chat from Jay Byrne, who says, thank you both again for the daily news, and great job as always.
Yeah! I was wondering why there was a silence there. I was like, what's he doing? I was like, is he choking? And then I heard the yeehaw. I was like, ah.
Had to go find my piece of tape real quick.
Well, I thank you so much for the support, and of course, I thank you so much for joining this channel. We try and make it as enjoyable as possible, and of course, provide interesting news. I hope we do. I hope we succeed every single night. I hope we are, because a lot of y'all do come back for it. So hopefully, that's a mark of the news being good. And of course, thank you so much for enjoying it and helping us to continue to make this news. Of course, without y'all support, it wouldn't be possible. And so I got to thank each and every one of y'all who supports this channel. So thank you once again. I hope you continue to enjoy tonight's coverage, and I hope you've enjoyed me addressing your question as well. And so with that, we're on to the next one, and thank you once again.
And up next, I'm going to give a shout out to Gary Robbins, one of our channel regulars, for putting in a $20 super chat. Just a moment here. And thank you very much, Gary, for that support. We know you've been around for a tremendously long time, and we appreciate you continuing to support our channel. And next up, we have a $20 super chat from Tim Swenson, who says, I've been watching since month 1 from LA, the LA south of you, LOL. And for those of you that aren't from Alabama, he means lower Alabama. He says, what y'all are doing is important. Keep it up and go LSA.
Hey, well, thank you so much for the support, and it's good to hear that we have another Alabamian here in the chat. Let's see, L.A., Lower Alabama. I consider everything in Lower Alabama to be south of Clanton. Hopefully everyone else has the same kind of definition of what Lower Alabama is. And I don't know where you could be down here. There's a lot of stuff in Lower Alabama or South Alabama. But I do thank you so much for the support, and I'm glad to hear that you have been watching since the start. There's actually a lot of Alabamians who watch this stream, which is completely shocking to me. I thought that would actually be one of the smaller groups to watch our streams, but actually it's one of our larger ones, at least here in the United States. I don't know if YouTube recommends the streams locally. I don't know if they do that kind of thing, but I still think it's incredibly cool, and I thank you so much for the support and enjoying the stream. Being here since the first month of the war has been a long time, definitely over 100 days at this point, and I hope you've been enjoying every single second of it, and helping to support Ukraine, and helping this channel to keep on going. And so thank you once again so much for the support, and with that, we are on to the next one. And also, because you're from Alabama, oh man, I can't say that. I was going... you know what? I'm going to be like the Crips and the Bloods, you know, tying their like rags together. I'm going to just say roll Eagle War roll Roll Eagle. Yeah, we'll just go with that. That's good enough. Thank you so much for the support. I hope that does answer the question. And with that, we're on to the next one.
Roll Tide. But anyways, I just want to quickly mention, let's see here, a live chat from Mel Cortez who says, "Is Nightbot a person? LOL." And if that is a serious question, the serious answer to that question would be no. Nightbot is simply a collection of code that occasionally puts out some announcements in our chat. But if you want him to be a real person, or he or she, it's up to you how you want to call that thing. But no, it's not a person. But anyways, moving on to the next super chat, we have a $20 donation from Ashley, who says, "Has Ukraine received any 155 airburst rounds? Wouldn't that be more effective against entrenched positions than direct fire?"
Well, Ashley, I got great news for you. They have received a decent amount of airburst rounds. We've seen actually a wide variety of them. We've seen the French provide 155mm airbursts for the Caesars. We've seen the United States maybe provide some airbursts, but the information on that's a little sketchy. But we certainly have seen the Germans provide airburst ammunition for the Panzerhaubitze 2000, and we have seen all of that in action. And I believe we saw one instance of that kind of ammunition being used tonight on an MTLB. And so the answer to that question is yes. There has been 155mm airburst munitions provided by multiple countries, as a matter of fact, during this war, and they are incredibly effective. We've seen them succeed multiple times on film, knocking out Russian vehicles. And so with that, I hope that does answer your question, Ashley, and thank you so much for the support and being a longtime channel viewer. And also, once again, gotta snatch the Oscar again and hand it to you for getting the answer correct to the riddle that was in the Morse code. And so with that, thank you once again for enjoying these streams so much. I thank you for supporting this channel and helping us to keep this thing running. And so with that, we're on to the next question, and thank you once again to a veteran of the Lee Spring Army, which is Ashley. And with that, we're on to the next one.
All right, and up next, we have a $20 super chat from Duan Champ 1988, who says, "You are becoming a goat. Nothing but love to you."
Thank you so much for the kind comment, Dwan Champ. Of course, I am incredibly thankful to everyone who enjoys the stream, and I thank you so much for giving me such a huge kudo. I just think I'm a normal person, just kind of average, but I thank you so much for the support. It's incredibly kind and incredibly humbling as well that a lot of people think highly of the coverage, highly of me and Matthew, and our continuing of covering this war news, and hopefully more in the future. And so with that, I thank you so much once again for the support. I hope that does answer the question. And I just saw something that made me have deja vu, because now I feel like we've done this before. Natoya85 says, "Breaking news, Pelosi's post, she's going to visit Taiwan."
Oh, is that true?
Let's pull up the Twitter of Nancy Pelosi, Speaker of the House of Representatives. Let's go to her Twitter. I feel like that may actually be on her congressional website. Let's see. Oh, come on. You're not going to put it on your website? Oh, let's see if we can get a Twitter. All right.
I see there is a headline here. 9 hours ago, Pelosi to leave for Asia amid Chinese threats over Taiwan stop.
Let's see. I want to make sure if we can find this on the Twitter. I would like to see, because this may start to become important news here in the future, and so we want to make sure to try and keep up on this as best as possible. We can see them, of course, talking about policy. We're not here to talk about policy. We're not touching on any of the stuff we're reading here on Twitter. We're trying to find the information. This is going back a little bit too far. We'll try and confirm that information in the future. Of course, Matthew found a news article saying that they are going to Taiwan, and if so, we're going to try and keep an eye on that as best as possible, and maybe try and jumpstart the news coverage on that a little bit sooner than later, because that may start to become a very important issue worldwide that may lead to some historic events occurring in the future, to say the least. And so with that, thank you so much for telling us that. We're definitely going to try and keep looking into that. And with that, we are moving on into the next question. And also, I just want to address real quick. I already see, it makes it hard to cover American politics. I got to be honest. Not American politics, but anything in America that I try and act like people are reasonable. but it's very tiresome that every time I try and pull up anything or look into anything that deals with America, the chat just goes wild with all kinds of nasty statements against whoever we're looking into or what we're doing, and we're not even trying to touch on politics. We're just trying to see if there's some kind of important information that may be happening, and then the chat descends into chaos. I gotta tell y'all, to all of the viewers who, you know, just watch and don't get into that, it's incredibly tiresome to me, and I'm going to have to be honest, we're going to start cracking down on that heavily in the future, because it's incredibly difficult to cover anything in a neutral standpoint when everyone's already trying to attack me as one person or the other, because I'm simply trying to confirm if someone's going on a trip overseas to a foreign country, which will have massive diplomatic and historical pertinence probably within the next few weeks. So with that, we're going to move on to the next question. And with that, on to the next one.
All right, and up next, I want to give a shout out to Fat Wong 36 for putting in a $20 super chat, but not leaving a comment. So, Fat Wong, I think you've been around since one of the very, very early days, like day 4 or 5, I think you said last time. But thank you very much for your support of the channel, and we appreciate you being around for a very long time. And up next, we have a $20 super chat from Telmed, who says, I was in a cafe in Dnipro eating cheesecake and drinking coffee. Ukrainian coffee is an espresso in a shot glass. After drinking 5 espressos and bouncing off the walls, the waitress informs me they do have American coffee.
Interesting. Well, I thank you so much for the support, and that is interesting to hear. Now, I don't know if we do that. Well, I don't drink a lot of like coffee in public. I just kind of like make it at home or get it out of a bottle. But that's interesting to hear that it's apparently served in shot glasses. Is that something normal we do here in the United States, Matthew?
Say it one more time.
Is like serving espresso in shot glasses something we do often here in the United States?
Some places, but not as often as is in Europe.
Interesting. I actually found that really interesting, actually. So I thank you so much for the support, and I hope that does answer the question. Oh, well, at least address the comment in a way. And that is cool to know that they have American coffee over there in Ukraine. And so with that, we're on to the next one, and thank you once again so much for the support. And so we're on to the next one.
And next up, let me give a shout out to Wolf Eyes 300 for putting in a $20 super chat. And I believe that is the first time they've supported the channel. So thank you so much for joining us and supporting us. And next up, we have a $20 super chat from Fat136 once again, who says, I've got a weird feeling that you could probably do a good Christopher Walken impression.
Christopher Walken. Unfortunately, I hate to say this, I don't know who that is. Of course, I'm not really into celebrities a lot. I do watch shows every once in a while, but very rarely. And so sadly, I don't know a lot about modern pop culture, music, or anything. I mean, I could tell you about anything, but the one thing I'll know the least about is the modern age. And so with that...
Now, Enforcer, just wait for it. Watch the live chat. Everybody's about to say, you don't know who Christopher Walken is?
Let's pull up Christopher Walken, so that way... it's already about to happen, but let's pull up Christopher Walken. Christopher Walken. Oh, this guy. Okay, I know who he is. I forgot.
Now I'm joining the people in the live chat. How do you not know who that is?
There they are. What? You don't know? And yes, I don't know. Sorry about that, everyone. But this is Christopher Walken. I know.
I recognize him now.
I recognize him now too. I think I may remember a little bit of what he sounds like, but not exactly. So I'll have to look into it a little bit, see about maybe trying to do that, and maybe do it on stream, although that's highly unlikely, to say the least. But I thank you so much for the support. Oh, wait a minute, that's the guy who said, not enough cowbell. I don't know how he said it. I'll have to go back and look at it, but thank you once again for the support, Fatwong36, and we will look into a Christopher Walken impression here in the future, and maybe add that to my repertoire. And so with that, I hope that does answer the question, and we are on to the next one.
And up next, we have a $15 super chat from Dan Boileau, who says, thank you for your hard work and coverage. I've been following for some time. Great work.
Well, I thank you so much for the support. Did he say he's in Washington?
No.
Oh, wait a minute. Hold on. Can you reread that one? I think I just got everything mixed up in my head.
So Dan said, thank you for your hard work and coverage. Been following for some time and great work.
Oh, Okay. Now I just realized my brain literally there's little partitions in my brain just for you to know, and I keep everything separated, but for some reason all the partitions were just lifted and everything in my head kind of just meshed into one giant soup, and so I just got all that wrong. But I thank you so much for enjoying this channel. I'm glad to know that you've been watching it for a while and enjoying it. We of course try and pride ourselves on good news coverage, and hopefully we continue to deliver on that. And hopefully in the future we'll be able to expand into more interesting topics from, well, not more interesting. This is about as interesting you can get. It's the largest war in Europe since World War II. But more interesting topics, hopefully that comes out the right way, like the Taiwan situation, and also other small events that happen around the world that are kind of more of one-offs, like the missile attacks on Erbil, which happened a while ago. If something like that happens again, I would like to be around to cover it. And so with that, I thank you so much once again for the support, and I hope that we're able to continue to cover the news in an incredibly good way, and hopefully continue to make sure that it's something that everyone can enjoy. And so with that, thank you once again for the support. I hope that does answer the question. And with that, we are on to the next one.
All right. And up next, we have a $20 super chat from Eric Bouchos, who says, just some support. Greetings from Brussels, Belgium.
Oh, Brussels, Belgium. You know what they have in Brussels, Belgium? Brussels sprouts. I'm just playing. But I thank you so much for the support, Eric. And of course, it helps us to keep running this channel. And I always love to hear where viewers are from. Now, one thing that may shock you is that I've never really looked at Brussels a lot on Google Street View. And so if you ever name off your town on stream and it's in a super chat, I always make sure to go and look at your town. We looked at Wilhelmshaven the other day. We've also looked at a town in Britain some time ago. It was actually a nice one. But let's go down to Brussels. Let's take a look at your hometown. Hopefully the downtown area right here. I'm seeing a lot of modern buildings from up here. And y'all know what I don't like? Modern buildings. I like traditional buildings all around the world. It keeps a lot of culture going. But not bad, actually. This is actually a pretty clean looking town in this area. The sidewalks are pretty clean. The buildings are nice looking. Wow, I actually got to say, I'm fairly... Oh, look at that cathedral. Oh, man, that's nice. Let's get down there. Now, I'm a sucker for cathedrals. I just got to say, I think they're beautiful, every single one of them. And wow, that's definitely a looker right there. Wow, what's this building? Let's actually see if we can get an answer to that. The Belgian National Bank. Wow, that is one heck of a building right here. Goodness. Wow, Matthew, look at... Now, that's something you'd see in a movie right there. That is an impressive interior.
I think they might have shot a movie in there. It looks familiar for some reason.
It looks like something from James Bond, or what's that movie that Tom Cruise is in? That's the one where he was hanging from the side of the plane.
Mission Impossible?
Yeah, Mission Impossible. It looks like something that would be in one of those movies. I've never really watched any of them, though, but still, I mean, like, wow, this is really an impressive building. The National Bank of Belgium has got a nice building, gotta say. On the outside, though, the columns are a little too simple for my taste, but still it has a very distinctive footprint on the city, and I gotta say, pretty neat all around. And so thank you so much for the support. Cool to hear you are from Brussels, and I hope that you've enjoyed us taking a quick little glimpse into your home city. Of course, we can't look at all of it, but just based off of what we saw, actually a pretty neat place. Might go someday. And so with that, that does address the comment, and thank you so much for helping this channel to keep on going. And so with that, we are on to the next one.
All right, and next up, we have a $20 super chat from Joseph Neves. And Joseph, first up, thank you for the support, but I'm going to have to modify the question just a little bit because it was going a little bit political, but we can still ask the question in one aspect. So the question is, Enforcer, if China shot down the U.S. Speaker of the House's plane, how upset would you be?
I am reading the unedited version of that super chat. And to answer that question more in the context of how it was originally asked, if an American politician or an American citizen of any sort was killed by any foreign government in any way, shape, or form, the answer to that question would always be a 10. Regardless of political affiliation, belief, or whatever you may have, an American is an American, and due to that reason alone, if they are killed by a foreign government, They require the utmost outrage of every single citizen, and that is how Americans can protect each other from foreign powers and tyrants around the world like the Chinese are trying to be. Regardless if that had been, and you know what, I'm just going to say names. If that had been Joe Biden, Donald Trump, Barack Obama, George Bush, I don't care who it was. If that was an American flying to Taiwan and their plane had been shot down, I would be enraged to the utmost and I would demand blood for that loss. Regardless of political position, they are an American representing the entirety of the country, every single one of us. And so if they do get shot down or killed in any way, that is literally an attack upon our entire country. And I believe that it just deserves the ultimate rage from everyone involved. And so with that, I hope that does answer your question. And I thank you so much for the support. And with that, we are on to the next one.
All right. And next up, we have a $10 super chat from No Comment. One moment here. I got to get rid of a troll. We do not like comments like that. We don't wish bad things on anybody, regardless of their political party. So that's just nasty talk right there. But anyways, next up, we have that $10 super chat from No Comment, who says, play Victoria Nero's song, 2.4 million views on YouTube. Peace.
I will take a look into that, but there's always a limitation that if it is copyrighted, we don't want a big copyright strike on our channel. It will cut out our coverage for an entire week if we do get a copyright strike, and so we always have to tread on careful waters with YouTube's guidelines, because we did agree to them, and they do have the ability to enforce them. And so if we play a copyrighted song like that has that many views that may be copyrighted, we could get a strike, and that's very serious for this channel, and also detrimental to our coverage, as it will shut us down for an entire week. And so with that, I hope that does answer the question. And I thank you so much for the support, but we will look into it. And if it's not copyrighted, I will consider throwing that down into our, I guess you could say, waiting room music. And so with that, we're on to the next one. And thank you once again for the support.
And next up, we have a $10 super chat from Ole Wolansky, who says, this is for doing what you do and in memory of the 53 Azov soldiers tortured and burned alive.
And I thank you so much for the support. And I do have to say that if we ever get official confirmation as video or picture evidence, which may be coming out in the future on that, we will definitely cover it and explain what happened. As far as we know, a decent amount of Azov prisoners were killed today in a deliberate attack. The Russians, of course, say it's accidental, but an attack like this must be deliberate, considering it happened against Azov prisoners of war, and scores of them were killed, and scores more were wounded. I think it's an unfortunate thing, and I do believe that the Russians that conducted that attack should be found and held accountable, or maybe just have their unit targeted and destroyed. And so with that, thank you so much for the support and enjoying the news coverage here on this channel. And with that, we're going to move on to the next question.
All right. And next up, we have a $10 super chat from Santiago Flores, who says, after the tragic events on Ukrainian POWs, I won't be surprised if the number of Russian POWs comes down, since the commander of the Ukrainian force said that they will avenge them.
Can you reread that one real quick?
Yes, Santiago said, after the tragic events on Ukrainian POWs, I won't be surprised if the number of Russian POWs comes down, since the commander of the Ukrainian force said that they will avenge them.
Well, I thank you very much for the support. I do think that the Ukrainians are a little bit above the Russians, at least in the amount they value lives at. We have not seen them execute any of the prisoners so far that we know of. I have seen a video, though, I will share, where the Ukrainians did stabbed Russians' eyeballs out with a screwdriver. Did see that before. That was incredibly early on in the war. And we have seen another one where they blew out their kneecaps with a rifle. Those were about the only two instances where I've seen the Ukrainians abusing prisoners. And I don't believe that... I believe that those are just things that happen incredibly rashly. We hardly ever see them. The Russians can't even produce a lot of... any videos, for that matter, of the Ukrainians doing that to their own soldiers. So... I think that the Ukrainians wouldn't stoop down to doing that. I would understand if they did, because usually the world works in an eye for an eye kind of way, but I think the Ukrainians would be a little bit above that, but still at the same time, I wouldn't doubt it if they did, and in the certain circumstances that we're starting to look at with how barbaric the Russians are against Ukrainians, I wouldn't really blame them for it. And so with that, I hope that does answer the question, Santiago. Thank you so much for the support and being a longtime channel viewer and supporter. It helps us to keep running, and without y'all support, it wouldn't be possible to keep these streams going. And so with that, we're on to the next one, and thank you once again for the support.
And up next, we have a $10 super chat from Santiago Flores once again, who says, when fighting stops, if Russia is not put out military out of action, Ukraine would have to have an armed border like the Koreas or West and East Germany.
That is a pretty good point, and I would have to agree. There is one logistical flaw with that I could see. The Ukrainian border and the Russian border is so long. It's something like nearly 800 miles long from end to end, that it would just it's just so large. I don't know if it'd be logistically possible to do something like that. The Ukrainians, of course, could fortify the major roadways heading into the country. For example, the E391, the E38, the H07, the E105, and among others. But I'm not really sure if they could fortify the entire border just due to the sheer size of it. But once again, nothing is impossible. It can happen. And I do believe that if the Russians were not I guess you could say, soundly defeated on the field in this war, we could see a very militarized border appear after the war, and we may see a militarized border appear anyways, even if the Russian army is soundly defeated, just because the Ukrainians would have a reason to do such a thing. And if the Ukrainians did become Western aligned or a member of NATO, the countries of NATO would step forward to make sure that that becomes a reality. And so with that, I thank you so much once again for the support, and I hope that does answer the question in a way. And with that, we're on to the next one. And thank you once again, Santiago, for the support.
And next up, we have a $10 super chat from Bubba Hotep, who says, thanks for the great coverage.
And thank you so much for enjoying it. We try our best, and I'm glad that you have enjoyed it and are helping us to keep it running. And so with that, we're on to the next question, and thank you once again for the support.
And up next, we have a $10 super chat from Privateer Station, who says, thank you, Enforcer. Come check Arestovich Fagan Daily War Chronicles on our station.
Well, thank you so much for the support, and I will try and check it out. Unfortunately, I can't get around to watching a lot of videos often because, you know, it's really hard to get around to doing a lot of things. I knocked out a lot of college work today, and that took up a decent amount of my time. But I will try and get around to looking at it because I always try and see some things that other people cover on the war here and there, and also go and check out other channels. So I thank you so much for the support. I will try and look into it, and with that, we're on to the next one. And thank you once again for the support.
Yes, indeed. And up next, we have a $10 super chat from Melissa Harden, who says, why didn't the Russian supporters in T&E Donbass who wanted to be part of Russia just move to Russia instead of causing so much trouble?
You know, it's an interesting question. That really actually has a pretty simple answer. The answer is that none of those so-called Russian-speaking Ukrainians really want to live in Russia. They really want to live in Ukraine, and the Russians just use that as a farce to invade the country and try and take some of the land and maybe try and reform the Russian Empire later on. So I hope that answers the question. It's always an interesting one to ask because it's kind of the question that was asked of German Poles that were in Poland after the end of World War II, because a large amount of Germany became Poland. If you look at older maps, there was actually like these two arms from Germany that reached out over the area of modern Poland and came all the way out to this area in Kaliningrad, which was once called East Prussia. And you can still kind of see the outline of East Prussia here on the map. It's this dotted outline that my mouse cursor is kind of moving around right here. That's the southern part of East Prussia. And they used to control a large amount of the area that we call Poland. But at the end of the war, the Soviet Union just chipped this clean off of Germany, and there was a load of Germans living here. The Russians then either had them shipped out into East Germany, or these Germans just packed up because the Polish were now in control, and they left. And, you know, there's a lot of instances of that happening. Now, one thing that's always interesting historically is that everyone always talks about how the West butchered the borders in Africa, the Middle East, and so on. But if you look into European history, you'll find out that borders just get butchered everywhere. That's kind of the textbook rule, because the United Kingdom is a great example. The Welsh hate the English, the Scottish hate the English, the Irish hate the English, not the Ulster Irish. They actually love the English, but well, that's mostly because they are English. But anyways, if you look at them, a lot of them hate each other on the British Isles. Although, you know, nowadays it's just kind of like a funny hate, but still at one point it's just raw hatred. In Germany, there's kind of a similar situation that happens there, but not to the same point. In Switzerland, the population is actually equally divided in thirds amongst French, German, and Italian speakers, and there's a very small amount that speaks Romansh. You can also look through pretty much, if you go through anywhere in Europe, there are a lot of borders that have been, I guess you could say, bastardized over time that don't really reflect the cultural boundaries or lines of native speakers and their cultures. And so it's just really interesting to comment on, and that is an interesting point with Ukraine, is that if those borders were not actually reflective of Russian speakers and they just didn't like it there was nothing stopping them at the time from moving into Russia. In fact, there was pretty much open borders in between Russia and Ukraine up until 2014, and they could have just gone to Russia if they wanted to. So a very good question, and I hope that does answer it at least in a way and give a little bit of historical precedent and historical examples of it. And with that, we are on to the next one.
And up next, let me give a shout out to Natoya85 for putting in a $10 donation. Thank you very much for that. And up next, we have a $10 super chat from Freedom First, who says, "Hello everyone. My question is, do you think we can have a no-fly zone now? Thanks and great show."
And I thank you so much for the support. Thank you for enjoying the show. And to answer that question, I don't think we could have a no-fly zone. That would pretty much be us directly entering the war, and it still does stand the same way. If we try and directly enter the war with something like that and enforce a no-fly zone where we have to shoot down Russian aircraft, we would practically be entering the war right then and there. So sadly, I don't think it'll be possible at any point in the war, but still, I will hold out hope for a day that the West can get more directly involved and try and bring this war to an end sooner. And so with that, I hope that does answer the question. And thank you once again for the support. Also, to address Andreas Marti, I do think that my statistics were a little incorrect there about the Swiss. So we'll pull up Swiss demographics and we'll look at the amount of speakers there that speak certain languages. So let's see here. Let's scroll down. There's a census in 2015. There was 8.3 million people living in Switzerland. Not bad. The population density is, of course, incredibly dense in the plains, but not in the Alps at all. We're going to move on down beyond that and get to the part that speaks about languages and who speaks what. Oh, interesting. They actually have a population distribution graph that shows per year. A lot of kids were born, like in the 70s, and they're just still there. But we're going to move on beyond that. Want to get down to, let's see, what is it? Language. Where's the languages? There we go. You're correct. Let me see if I can find those stats again. I want to compare them. Oh man, I can't find it again. Let's just see. Hopefully, the demographics total up to the same. But we can see language-wise, 62.8% of them speak Swiss German or German. 22.9% speak Italian. Oh no, French. 8.2% speak Italian. English just 5.1%. That's wild. Portuguese is 3.7%. Albanian is 3.1%. Serbo-Croatian 2.4%, Spanish 2.3%, Romansh 0.5%. That's actually a traditional language of the Swiss people, much like Cornish is a traditional language of the people of Cornwall. And then the other 7.5% is made up of everything else. The Swiss are actually an incredibly interesting country to look at. I mean, I would highly suggest just reading into Switzerland as a nation, their government, their people, their culture, and everything, because it's an enigma, to say the least. But with that, I hope that does kind of review that comment, and it does appear that it wasn't broken up into equal thirds. I was wrong, and hopefully that correction can be rectified there. And so with that, we are on to the next one, and thank you so much for correcting me on that.
And real quick, just to cover the poll that I put up about 7 minutes ago, the question was, do you think the prisoner swap between the USA and Russia will eventually occur? 44% of you said yes, it will happen eventually, 27% said maybe, and 29% said no, Russia is playing games. And I have to say, I was in that 29% that said no, Russia is playing games. I think that the Russians are just, kind of trying to mess with us. They're either going to try to say, release every Russian prisoner we have from the United States in exchange for the one basketball player or something goofy like that. I don't think it's actually going to happen. But what are your take on that, Enforcer?
I would largely have to agree with yours. I don't really think that the Russians will be apt to play ball with the transferring prisoners. It's something that they've done. We've seen instances of them trading prisoners before, but considering that they may have just killed dozens of Azov prisoners, practically deliberately, I'm not really sure if that will happen anymore. So I hope that does address the poll on my end, and with that, we're on to the next one.
And up next, we have a $10 super chat from JK, who says, Enforcer, I don't care what anybody says. Your Mike Tyson impersonation is good if you want it to be. F. Putin and his friends if he has any.
Well, thank you very much for the support. I'm glad that you do enjoy the Mike Tyson impersonation. And every time that name is mentioned now, there are haters who just are like, oh, Mike Tyson cringe. And I see them say that in the chat. And I just want y'all to know that, it just is what it is. I don't know. I mean, like, I try and do things to lighten it up a little bit. I see that some people like some ways that it's lightened up. Some people don't. I try my best. So with that, I'm glad that you do enjoy it. We'll maybe try it out in the future again, but trying to conserve it by and large, so that way, there won't be anyone who sits there and, just loses it. So with that, I hope that does answer the question. And also, I just saw someone say, just don't say Candyman. And I may not have watched a lot of movies, but I've seen a movie summary on YouTube of Candyman, and I do know about that one. And so with that, we are on to the next one. And thank you once again for the support.
All right. And next up, we have a $10 super chat from Mr. Diggs, who says, no sports, but please think about this. With 9/11, all sports from NCAA to pro were in full swing. NSA had to shut down all flying in MW as a whole nation NBD, but for individuals in these sports, it hurt.
Well, I thank you very much for the support, but unfortunately, due to the abbreviations, and I think it may just be my brain getting a little cluttered up because it is getting a little late, unfortunately, I don't know exactly what that is meaning. Do you know what it means, Matthew?
Let's see here. And I know what the NSA is, obviously, but flying in MW, I don't know what that is, and I don't really know, to be honest.
Well, unfortunately, I won't be able to answer that one. I do thank you very much for the support, and I thank you for sharing the info. As far as I can tell, it's about flight regulations during 9/11. So thank you once again. And with that, we're going to move on to the next one. I actually saw a really interesting request pop up in the chat from Sour Vodka. He said, the Enforcer, can you impersonate Enforcer Matt? Hey everyone, alright, and we got another $10 super chat from Lawrence Kreger saying, you do a great job and keep it up. You are not responsible or all the political people. And Matthew, you impersonate me.
That is interesting. I'm not sure if we'll see what the chat has to say about it, but somewhat interesting.
I'm just playing. That was not a good Enforcer Matt impersonation. But with that, we are moving on to the next one, and I hope I didn't offend you, Matthew. It's just all in good fun.
No, but it was a good attempt at an impersonation. But it looks like the chat is laughing out loud, so apparently they thought it was good. Somebody said 8 out of 10. So Mark rates you pretty highly. Somebody said, not even close. I'd have to agree with you, Alexander, on that one. But anyways, before we get too sidetracked, I'm going to move on to the next one. Lawrence Krieger says, you do a great job and keep it up. You are not responsible for all the political people. And Lawrence puts in a $10 donation.
Well, thank you so much for the support, Lawrence. And also, I do know that I'm not responsible for all the political people, but I find it sad as the state of the country that no one can talk about politics anymore. No one can even talk about our country anymore without people just saying nasty things. I wish there was a day that we could wake up in the United States and everyone just went, we got a lot of problems. Sure, there's a lot of things that can be fixed, but I'm sure I am happy to live here. There is nothing else I would do in the world rather than be in the United States and be happy that I'm here. And I feel 100%, and I support everyone in the world who feels that way about the country. Every country has problems, up and down. Will that they ever be fixed? Probably not. That's the honest answer. But I still think that that one should always be proud of their country and proud of what they do, because I just don't like it. Everyone these days has the same gripe, the same whine, and everyone has become the same kind of people. Everyone always complains, everyone always whines, there's never solutions brought up to these complaints, and everyone always just wants to be the victim of the other side. They're trying to destroy the country, they're trying to destroy me and my way of life and kill me and my whole family, and it's that way every single time politics is ever brought up. It used to not be that way. I remember when I was a kid, it was never that way, but over the past 12 years, it's turned into that. And I just find it sad. I really do. Because and I'm not saying this just as the United States. I'm not saying the United States is the only great country in the world. If you're from Britain, I hope you're happy for your country. I hope you wake up every day and you're like, man, it's great to be a British person. If you're in Ukraine, I hope you're saying, wow, it's so great to be a Ukrainian. It's a wonderful day in Ukraine. There's things that are wrong, but everything's going pretty good for me, and I'm pretty happy. I hope that for everyone. I hope that everyone just sits there and says, things don't go great. Things are never going to run right. We'll try and improve them over time, but I'm still happy to be here. I just wish people had that mindset instead of always trying to be down in the dumpster, and down in the dumps and always create fights and turmoil and strife. There's so much to live for and so little time to live for it. And to sit there and get caught up in superficial politics that really make no change in the world is just something I'm not really into. And so with that, I thank you so much for the support. I know I'm not responsible for the political people, but still, I don't like that there can never just be a candid, nice time in American politics where people could just say, well, I think this way, well, I disagree. Okay, well, that's fine. There's never a time like that, or a time where everyone's like, we got some problems, but it's great to be an American, right? Yeah, it's great. Never a time like that. I'm not saying that to one side or the other. I'm saying that to both sides. Everyone whines just about the same these days. And so with that, we were on to the next one. And thank you so much for the support. And I hope that everyone can agree with me on that right there. And so with that, we're moving on to the next one.
All right. And up next, we have a $5 super chat from Winston Segner, who says, thank you.
And thank you so much, Winston, for supporting this channel and helping us to keep on running. Of course, every little bit of support counts, and I thank you so much for helping us to keep this thing going. And so with that, we are on to the next one.
And up next, we have a $5 super chat from Lovin' to Pops, who says, hello, Matt and Enforcer. Ye have some Irish viewers as well. Keep up the great coverage.
Oh my god, we got Irish viewers! I haven't heard that until now, and that is really cool to hear. And so thank you so much for the support. I wish I knew where you're from in Ireland. Most people, I think, statistically would live in Dublin, but there's some people who live in Galway and Cork and Limerick. Hopefully I'm saying Limerick right. I don't want to butcher the pronunciation of the name there, but thank you so much for the support. And it's cool to hear that we have some Irish supporters. Welcome to the Lee Spring Army. I don't know how long y'all been around, but it's cool to know that y'all are here too. And so with that, thank you so much for the support. I hope that does answer the question. And one day I hope to go to Ireland. I've heard some interesting things. A lot of people I've known have gone to Ireland, and they say it's really pretty. And if it's as pretty as the rest of the British Isles, I wouldn't doubt it. I bet it's a beautiful place, and I'd like to go one day. It's just that I'm always scared, knowing the history of the Troubles. I'm always scared of going near the Northern Irish border, just in case of the IRA does something. They haven't done anything for a while, and that's true. But still, it's just off chance. Like, what if for some reason that was the day they started another car bomb? What if something went wrong? And that's always what I'm scared about with going to Northern Ireland. But with that, I hope that does answer the question. I thank you so much for the support. And thank you to all of my Irish viewers for also being a member of the Lee Spring Army. And with that, we are on to the next one. And thank you so much for the support.
And up next, we have a $5 super chat from Like Block, who says, no, that bomblet drop wasn't luck, but black magic and Ukrainian super soldiers from U.S. secret labs. Source, Russian media. Trust me, bro.
Well, thank you so much for the support. And yes, that is true. It was in fact dropped by Captain Ukraine himself. He was injected with the Temp V from the Vault Company, and then it became permanent. And so now he's in fact dropping bomblets straight down into the hulls of BMPs through the black magic that he's harnessed from the Ukrainian witches in the countryside. And so I thank you so much once again for the support, for touching on all the points that we have covered eventually on this channel about that kind of crazy outlandish stuff. And so with that, thank you so much once again. And thank you just once again for joking. It's of course important to have a little bit of a light about oneself and joke a little bit in a war. No reason to be doom and gloom. It's not going to help or change the situation in any way. And so with that, we're on to the next one. And trust me, bro, I thank you so much. And with that, we're on to the next one.
And up next, we have a $10 super chat from Michael Cabrera, who says, keep up the awesome work and don't stop your humorous snippets. They give us a break and make us smile.
Well, I thank you so much for the support, Michael. And of course, that's something that I've tried to emphasize since the start of the war. And also, that's something that I don't. I feel like I'm soapboxing a lot tonight, but I don't know why people complain about that kind of stuff. About joking and stuff, because yes, it is a war and people are dying. But whether I sit here and have a serious tone or not, in certain instances, is not going to change that fact. And I don't get it, because whenever there is an unfortunate thing to cover, we of course get a somber tone. There is no joke said about it, and we make sure to try and keep things as respectable as possible. But at the same time, we don't want this war, we don't want this thing to be doom and gloom throughout the entire thing, even when there is times to celebrate, such as Ukrainian successes and things like that. And so I thank you so much, Michael Cabrera, for being a longtime channel viewer and also enjoying the little jokes I throw out, because I always want to make sure that while it's a tough thing and bad things are happening, that we can all make sure to try and get through it, make sure to support Ukraine, and make sure not to tire of it. Because I can tell you this, I also do that for my own sanity. I've watched people have terrible things happen to them, and if anyone knows what's really going on in this war, it would, it's not to toot my own whistle or act like I'm special or anything, but if anyone knows what's going on in this war, it's me. I sit here and look at it about 9 to 10 hours a day, and so I know what happens over there, and this is kind of keep my own sanity, is to have a little bit of humor, or else if I sat here and acted like the whole weight of the world was on me, I would lose it. And so with that, I thank you so much once again for the support, Michael. I hope that does address the comment, and with that, we're on to the next one.
All right, and just a heads up to everybody, we have just 10 super chats left until we move on to our live chat questions.
10?
So stick around and we'll get to them shortly. Yes, that's correct. We do have 10.
Golly, we've had a lot of them tonight. And so with that, on to the next one.
And up next, we have a $5 super chat from That Frost Wolf, who says, every time Putin lies, his Alice in Wonderland table grows in size.
It does. I've noticed that too during the war. And so thank you so much for the support. I would have to agree with that. And due to the sake of time, because this thing is starting to go into overtime here, we're going to move on to the next question. But thank you so much for the support and the pretty good joke right there. And so with that, we're on to the next one.
And up next, we have a $5 super chat from Good Dogs, who says, thank you for what you guys do.
And I thank you so much for the support. And we try our best to do our best, and I thank you so much for enjoying what we do. And so thank you once again for the support. And with that, we're on to the next one.
And up next, we have a $5 super chat from Ronald Wilcox, who says, what is a Tennessee fainting goat, and why do they faint?
It's not really a Tennessee fainting goat. They're really just like fainting goats all around. They're all over the world. And the goats, I don't think all of them have this trait, but it's a certain kind of genetic defect in a goat where if they get freaked out, they can stiffen up, and they stiffen up like a board. They get rock solid, and they just fall over because they cannot move. Their muscles freeze up. It's like they go into some kind of rigor mortis and they're still alive. Apparently this genetic defect exists in the wild for wild goats. So that way that one member of the group will freeze up and fall over. It'll be eaten and killed, of course, by whatever is attacking the whole entire group, but the rest of them will survive because that one serves as a distraction. Apparently that's the best explanation anyone's came up to this genetic defect, but that's what the Tennessee freezing goats are. And so with that, I hope that does answer your question, and I thank you so much for the support. Hope we were able to add a little bit of clarity there. And so we're on to the next one.
And up next, we have a $5 super chat from Yuri Bench, who says, you have two permanent fans from the country that never stops making wars, Israel. Me and my brother.
Well, I thank you so much for the support. I don't know if the Israelis are actually always making wars, but one thing I can say is that I thank you so much for the support, and it is cool to hear that we do have viewers from Israel. We have seen shekels in the chat before, and I saw them earlier just again, and so I thank you once again. I don't know where you are from in Israel, but Israel is not a big country, so you're either from, let me guess, Beersheba, Jerusalem, Tel Aviv, or Haifa. If I got that correct, let me know and tell me what I want. And so thank you so much for the support. It's good to hear that we do have Lee Spring Army members from all around the world, including Israel as well, much like Ireland, Germany, India, and so on. And so with that, we're on to the next one, Canada, Australia, New Zealand. I know someone's going to be like, you forgot one. And I know, I'm just trying to keep the list a little short. And so with that, we're on to the next one. And thank you once again.
And up next, we have a $5 super chat from Zyper Sniper 1, who says, if you like to see fancy churches or cathedrals, have you seen Nidarosdomen, Trondheim, Norway?
I think I have. I think you're talking about the all wood one. Trondheim Church. Oh man, let me see if wait a minute. Is he talking about the Nidaros Cathedral?
He just says Nidarosdomen, Trondheim, Norway.
I think this is
That's probably it.
Oh wow. So. Oh, that's beautiful. Yeah, I like that one. One that I really like. There's actually a couple of them. I won't hold y'all for long on this because I know we're short for time, but I have to show y'all some. Since 1 second. Man, VPNs do wonders. I clicked on this thing and it said we're in New York. Anyways, let's go over to Britain and check out a few. Most of my favorites are British. There's one in Salisbury. It actually has one of the oldest clocks in the world in it. I believe it may actually be the oldest, but it's the Salisbury Cathedral right here. Very beautiful cathedral. I'm a huge fan of its design, its architecture. And of course, the vaults in the ceiling. I like them a lot. Also, another interesting one is the Lincoln Cathedral. I'm trying to go over these as fast as possible. The Lincoln. Come on, where's Lincoln? I gotta find it. I know where it is. There it is, Lincoln. Lincoln Cathedral. Looking for the Lincoln Cathedral. There it is. Lincoln Cathedral, which is an absolute monster of a creation. Nothing in this thing is symmetrical. Everything was done kind of haphazardly, which I think is a unique trait of it. The vaulting is, in fact, not uniform on the ceiling. It looks like it, but if you look at it in great detail, it's not. Some of the arches in here are not the same length, like in terms of width. It is a crazy, wild cathedral. I think it's really cool, though. It did take a while for them to build it, and I think that's the reason why some of the stuff was kind of like, I guess you could say, short-circuited. There was also a lot of funding issues, which also led to things being shrunk a little bit every once in a while. Which you can actually see right there. See how these windows right here, from here to the right over, are all symmetrical, except for these, which look a little scrunched up. That kind of stuff is really cool about... also, someone said the oldest clock is in Prague. Thank you very much for correcting me on that, Archangel. But I still think that's an incredibly cool feature of the Lincoln Cathedral. Very interesting little piece of history, and it reflects in the architecture, which is just cool. And of course, my favorite one, also the largest one in Northern Europe, is the York Minster Cathedral. I know a lot of people are into Notre Dame and Westminster Abbey and such things like that, but York Minster I've seen in real life, and it is an impressive cathedral. Of course, one of the largest ones in the world, largest one in Northern Europe, and when you see it, it is just truly amazing. And so with that, I hope that's kind of talked about cathedrals a little bit, and thank you so much for sharing that one in Trondheim. I do have to say it's beautiful as well, and it may actually rank out there on the list that I got. And so with that, we are on to the next one, and thank you once again for the support.
All right, and up next, we have a $5 super chat from Martin G, who says, follow since day 80 from Basel, Switzerland. Really appreciate your work. Fundraiser improvement tip. Give your guest more time and valuation. Starsky deserves proper intro and goodbye talks. He's a celeb.
Well, thank you so much for the support, and it is cool to hear that we have a viewer from Switzerland. That is really cool, and I got a lot of respect for y'all's country. I think it's an incredibly interesting case out there in the world of how a country is run. It's literally an anomaly. There's no other country run like it, at least in terms of how its government is formed. To answer the part about Starsky, we kind of have decided, because it seems we reached out to a lot of people, and I'm going to be honest, we never got a reply back from Denis Davidoff. You know, he said he did. We never saw one on the email. We never saw one on Discord. We never saw one anywhere. So we're kind of considering cutting out guest stars by and large, because it seems to be too difficult to try and coordinate or have anyone reply. And so we're probably not going to have guest stars on again. But if we do, we will make sure to take note of that and try and implement that. And so with that, thank you once again so much for the support. And with that, we are going to move on to the next one.
And up next, we have a $5 super chat from Zyper Sniper 1, who says Putin will have a new nickname now, and after the war, just like Ivan the Terrible, we can call him Putin the Butcher.
And I thank you very much for the support, and I would agree that hopefully he gets some kind of a name to signify how sick of a person he was. But sadly, Joseph Stalin or Mao Zedong never got a name, so I'm not sure if he would get one, but I would have to say that if we started labeling people, then I would say that would be a pretty good title. And so with that, thank you so much for the support. I hope that does address the comment. And with that, we are going to move on to the next one. And also to address real quick, some people real quick that said some things. Enforcer for President said, I told him you emailed him too. Yes, that is true. I actually reached out to all of them over email and they never responded, which was what I was waiting for. And they didn't. I'm not saying that that's a strike against them or anything. They're respectable YouTube channels out there doing their thing. It's just that they never responded to us. Also, let's see. Don't give up on that. Guests grow the channel. They do, in a way. But, of course, we still grow anyways. And so... yeah, and so with that, I hope that answers a couple of y'all's questions, and we're on to the next one.
And also, folks, just a quick note, if we could, please try to keep it civil over there in the live chat. I'm not sure what has happened in the last 10 minutes, but it appears a row has started in the live chat between a few different viewers. Y'all please try to get along over there. I would like to be able to say who's in the right and wrong, but I haven't been watching the live chat that closely. So I'll check into it a little bit later, but please, folks, let's please keep it civil. It's the question segment, so it should be pretty chill. But anyways, moving on, we have a $3 super chat from Wayne's World of Science and Technology, who says, Enforcer, please look for evidence of equipment movement, Slava Ukraine.
And thank you so much for the support. We will look for evidence of equipment movement, but sadly, that's incredibly hard for us to do. We're not privy to day-to-day satellite footage, sadly, and that's usually how movement is kind of picked up and worked on. But we will look into a way to try and figure that out, at least through the news that we cover. And so with that, thank you so much for the support. I hope that does answer the question. And with that, we are on to the next one.
And up next, we have a $2 super chat from Vladimir Putin, who says, we can't afford any more Ladas. Please stop killing.
No. And we're going to keep on. And so thank you for the support. And I hope that addresses the comment. And with that, we are on to the next one. And also, I would like to ask, don't know why people are getting into fights in the chat. I did see that one of our longer time channel viewers apparently was kind of logging out of the chat, I guess. And I would ask that y'all don't. We will look into the situation and see what's going on and see if there's a way we can rectify it. And so with that, just please remain civil. That's all I ask. And so with that, we're going to move on to the next one.
All right. And I want to give a shout out to Dupper Bob for putting in a $2 super chat, and also Zach Jeffers for putting in a $1 super chat. Thank you very much for your support of the channel as always. And moving on, we have a $2 super chat from Doomsday Games, who says, I love seeing Russia leaving us tanks in Ukraine.
And I have to say, I agree. I love seeing the Russians leaving us some tanks. It's like Christmas presents, just left around. They leave them on top of other things like anti-personnel mines, and they're all free. All you have to do is go get them. And so thank you so much for the support, and I do agree. The Russians have been helping you all to win the war against the Russians for quite some while. And with that, we're on to the next one. And thank you so much for the support.
And for our final super chat of the night, until we move on to our multiple live chat questions, we have a $2 donation from CA Lags, who says, it's nice to see NATO equipment being validated.
And I do agree. It's nice to see that NATO equipment is being tested in the field, and we can see that all of our Western equipment does stand up against Russian counterparts. And I do think that it's an important lesson for all of us to see in the West, and a good reason for us to have confidence in our militaries and the technology they use. And so with that, I hope that does answer the question. And with that, we are on to the next one.
And real quick, I want to give a shout out to Devin Betterton for putting in a $2 donation. Thank you very much, Devin, for your support. And moving on to our live chat questions. Up first, we have a question from Pakating, who says, Enforcer, are there any Russian states or territories that have balked or refused to support Russia in the invasion of Ukraine?
Not that I. Can you reread that one real quick?
Yes, he says, Enforcer, are there any Russian states or territories that have balked or refused to support Russia in the invasion of Ukraine?
Not that I know of, at least not directly and publicly where we were able to know about it. And so with that, I hope that does answer your question. We are on to the next one.
And up next, I want to recognize a $1 donation from Full Circle Productions. Thank you very much for your support of the channel. And next up from the live chat, we have a question from David Bryan, who says, Enforcer, will the U.S. have enough rockets to sustain the conflict with HIMARS throughout the war?
They might. We don't really know the daily the daily missile consumption of the Ukrainians to kind of ascertain the amount of stockpile we have versus the amount of consumption and all that in between. But I would largely assume that the United States, being the global superpower they are and the burgeoning military muscle that they have, that they would be able to provide enough missiles for the Ukrainians to carry on throughout the war without really having to consider any of the supply side issues as a factor. And so with that, I hope that does answer the question, David. And with that, we are on to the next one.
And next up, we have a question from Eddie Turner, who says, Enforcer, do you think Russia is holding back their high-tech weapons, or are they just that much of a sorry military?
The high-tech weapons that they have don't really exist. The T-14 Armada is still in prototype phase. They're still trying to iron out the kinks and the problems with the tank. And the Su-57 has pretty much fallen under the same category, with very few models of it even existing, and all of them are prototypes. I think maybe a fewer production series, but there's only like 4 production models of the Su-57. So in that regard, you are seeing on the battlefield right now the best equipment that the Russians can field. They fielded everything that can be considered modern T-80 BVMs, T-90Ms, T-90As. They've sent it all, the best they have. And there's really nothing more that exists that's more modern than that. And so I hope that does answer the question. And with that, we're going to move on to answer 3 more questions from the live chat, and then we're going to round out tonight's stream.
And next up, we have a question from Winnebago, who says, Enforcer, if Russia strikes a ship transporting Ukrainian grain, and that ship happens to belong to a NATO country, would that trigger Article 5 protection under NATO?
It might. I'm not entirely sure how Article 5 works. I'm not sure if that pertains to maritime property of a NATO member. But I will look into that and try and get an answer to you. I'm going to have to declare ignorance right now because I'm not exactly sure how Article 5 works with ships at sea, but I hope that does at least provide a bit of an answer, at least as far as I know right now. And with that, we are on to the second to last question of the night.
And next up, we have a troll, which I'm going to get rid of right now. Just a moment. There we go. Up next, we have a question from Wildcat, who says, did you guys hear about missile hit prisoner count?
We did. We haven't been able to confirm it with video or picture evidence, but that has been circling around a lot. And we've heard that several dozen, as of prisoners, may have been killed and dozens more wounded. And so I hope that does answer the question. And with that, we are going to move on to the final question of the night. And so who's the lucky last person who threw in that lucky last question?
And the last one of the night is from Lawrence Wells, who says, let's see here. Can we say that the Ukraine are getting good info of the ammo dumps from the USA spying on the Russians and passing the info on to the Ukrainians? Would this be correct?
Yes, that would be correct. They are getting a decent amount of information from the United States via satellite image, and so I would say that that's helping them out a lot in this war. And so with that, once again, that's based off of my knowledge and my information. May be correct, may not be, but as far as we knew at the beginning of the war, they are being provided with nearly daily updates of satellite pictures and information. And so with that, I hope that has answered your question, and we have reached the end of tonight's stream. I thank you all so much once again for watching. It has been an absolute pleasure to cover the news of the war in Ukraine. I hope you all found it interesting, and I hope I've been able to answer some of y'all's questions incredibly well. With that, we're now going to be ending tonight's stream. I thank you all so much once again for watching, and if you are new to this stream, please make sure to like, comment, and subscribe, as these streams run daily at 10 p.m. Eastern Time, except for Mondays, and we cover the past 24 hours of the war in Ukraine. Literally, pretty much non-stop, continuous coverage. And so with that, thank you all once again, and I will see you all tomorrow at 10 p.m. Eastern Time to cover the day 157 news of the war in Ukraine. Thank you all once again, and I'll see you then. Good night, and take care.